Well, howdy there, folks. So yeah, it's our hangout. Don't worry, I've already spoken with Nathan. He's coming on. He's just getting a little extra caffeine because I know I ain't making it through this without some real caffeine here. Anyway, long story short, this is our hangout. We're gonna talk. We're just gonna chit chat, and we're gonna take questions. Nathan, I'll give Nathan a proper introduction when he hops back on. And let's actually say howdy to everybody while he gets his caffeine going. Cheese Freak Ginger Snap, howdy. Gene, Titan. Oh, look, there I am. Bob, who let you in? Titan, howdy. A Brunson, Beta Aquari. You're new, but I think I saw you mentioned down here that you are Titan's son. Oh, look at that. We're getting whole families mixed up in our craziness. Well, welcome, Beta. It's a pleasure to have you. Lamp of Light. Howdy. Yeah, this is just a hangout. Like, this is a lot less formal. No real plan of attack on this beyond just having a good time, asking some questions of our special guest when he becomes available. But yeah, so gonna be fun. Oh, Titan's daughter. Sorry. I'm sorry. Titan's daughter. I my apologies. I must have. You know what? Yeah, okay, I must have skipped over something that said okay, yeah, no. Okay. So daughter. Well, congratulations. Welcome to the craziness. It doesn't get any better than this, really. I mean, this is but what I mean by that, it's not going to get any smarter. It's only going to go downhill. And it looks like Nathan is here. So let's give a big not another Bible study welcome to Nathan. Howdy, Nathan.
Howdy.
So we were actually just being introduced to. We have a new. We actually have a new sort of, I guess, viewer participant in chat, Beta Aquari, and we just found out it was the daughter of one of our longtime, let's say accomplices. I like accomplice. Oh, Bigfoot Michigan Rob, Susan, howdy.
Is this live?
Bob, we're not talking to you. What? Yeah, we're live. And so
okay.
we're live now, so you're good. So
I see it now.
Yeah. There you go. So we're live. We're just saying hi to everybody, giving you a chance to get all caffeinated and come on. But I was just saying hi to everybody. It's Saturday. It's a lot less formal. Not the word for formal around here anyway.
Got my Bass Pro mug here. Give a plug there for Bass Pro.
There you go. Yeah. My kids, when they were younger, we used to take them there all the time just so they could run around and see the fish.
I love that place. Oh, speaking of fish.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Speaking of fish. Well, but actually, let's come back to that. Because I kind of want our nice viewers here to although that would have been a great dang it. I wish we had saved that for later. Because that is a direct tie-in. But yeah, no. So we actually met through a mutual friend.
We did?
And we met through I just forgot his name. How did I forget his name?
This is great. People are commenting while we're talking. This is so cool.
Yeah. Oh no!
Hi, Susan.
I love
this.
Hey,
Rob. Man, that's so cool. Hello, Nathan. Who's this? Cheese Freak Ginger Snap. What kind of a name is that?
Ginger Snaps. It's an awesome name, is what it is.
It's
probably my favorite name on the internet.
I love this. Bigfoot Michigan Rob.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's actually thrown some sightings of pterosaurs up north in my way, so I'm trying to map those out.
I just heard about pterosaurs recently. Garth Guessman was talking to me about it.
Yeah, well, I saw one.
Do you know him?
Like, not personally, no.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, no, it was Tim McLean's. That's who put us in contact originally.
Yeah, it's so crazy. These things are like still. Do you talk about all of the different weird animals on here, or is that another channel?
Well, okay, so that's why this is not another Bible study. All of our people here, right? At least most of them know me from Texas Front Porch, where that is a cryptozoological paranormal sort of a show, right? It's things we talk about. So what I do here, and this is sort of my ministry aspect of it, is I want to approach the Bible from a truly biblical worldview, which includes the supernatural, includes the cryptozoological, and we put everything in context. In fact, on Thursday nights, we've been doing we've been going through Genesis. We've wrapped up Revelation. We finally got to Genesis 6 because everyone was chomping at the bit for that. To talk about the Nephilim. So we've been talking about the Nephilim for the last 3 weeks. That's a
popular topic. Yeah, Nephilim, that's really popular.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
No,
that's a big one.
It's because it's sort of been rediscovered, right? I mean, it was sort of rejected for so long that it's like it's sort of rediscovered. And it's so important. The thing that I have discovered is how I know you're still chomping. We are going very meticulously building an argument. Like first we started in Genesis 6.
What are these people chomping for? What do they want?
Oh, they want Nephilim all the time, man.
Oh, they want Nephilim.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Well, Lamp of Light. So, you know what, Lamp of Light? Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's so true. That's so true. This study includes everything the mainstream churches are scared to talk about. That's so true.
Yeah. Nah, I mean, there's like the Nephilim are such a that's the key that unlocks so many things in the Bible. It really does. Now, I do think though I think the problem is because we're all humans are pendulums, right? Mm-hmm. We've gone from rejecting that they even exist to now they're responsible for everything, and it's like, hold up, we got to move them. What I'm trying to do is move our understanding back to where they should be. Like they are a key that unlocks a lot of things in Scripture, a lot of behaviors. I would even say the reason Jesus does the thing he does after his resurrection is in direct response to the Nephilim. It's so that charge can't be labeled.
Hey, just so everybody knows, I'm drinking this green tea because it has caffeine in it, and I don't want to yawn on his show and make it seem like he's boring. No, I'm just tired. I don't know why.
Yep. So, okay, Lamp of Light. So I've heard this too. I mean, not from you specifically, but I've heard this from other people. They're like, they share their demonic experience with someone, and they're like, hey, we don't want to talk about that because it glorifies Satan. Or I've had one person tell me to my face, I don't want to think about that because it's too frightening. I'm like, what? Tell me anywhere else in your world where that even applies. It's like, I don't want to learn about muggers because that's too scary to think about. Like the muggers are going to show up whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So they're chomping on. They're really chomping at the bit to get more into the meat of what the Nephilim do and how they've sort of worked throughout history. Because there's this question: are they Bigfoot? Like, is Bigfoot a form of Nephilim? Are some of these creatures, these other things like are they? So so there's a lot there. We just got to dig into it.
We have a Bigfoot myth. I don't know if you can call it a myth or whatever, but we have a Bigfoot thing here in town where there's a street called Cole Street where there's like 30 sightings or something of Bigfoot. But I don't know, maybe it was just a runaway baboon or something. I don't know.
let me help you out with that. Probably not.
Probably not.
What I mean is probably not a runaway baboon. So the one thing that I've learned is that
it's so annoying to me because every time you go into this town, they got these Bigfoot cutouts and they put the orange safety vests on them. And I think there's a guy crossing the street and I'm going to hit him. I'm like, no, it's just a stupid Bigfoot thing. And they got them everywhere. Anyway, so stupid.
That's awesome. Okay, that's awesome. Actually, I think my favorite one, it was, where was it? Who was telling me about this? But someone had a Bigfoot cutout it was a recent election, and they actually had their sign on the Bigfoot, like the Bigfoot was holding it. So,
oh, that's funny. So the sign, the Bigfoot was holding up the sign. That's funny.
Yeah. So anyway, so Tim McLean's actually put this together, but I think it was about the time you had put out the the pyramids video.
Oh, the pyramids. Okay, yeah. So 2017.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's only we've only known each other a couple of years.
I have this deer like right above me, right above my head there.
Yeah, no. If it was a little bit lower, it would be like you'd have antlers, and that would be cool.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
It would. So let's so let's actually bring people to why I wanted you on, because we're actually, once we get past the Nephilim, which is going to be like a couple weeks from now, and once we get past the flood, we're going to come to a really interesting section of scripture where we get into the generations of people and how long people lived and all that. And that's actually a big thing that you've been working, that you part of your work is going through the Septuagint, because most of our Bibles are based on the Masoretic text.
The Old Testament,
for the Old Testament, of course. But you've been looking into the Septuagint and some of these other traditions that have that there are differences in those traditions versus the Masoretic text. Meaning, and being it's like an extra 750 years in the Septuagint as far as the ages of some of these early patriarchs.
Did you say 650 or 750?
750. Well, what is, I may be wrong because I'm terrible with numbers, which is why I work in real estate.
650. Yeah, that's right. What's up?
So explain that for us. Like, what is that? What's that about?
I mean, you can watch the video and find out, but
which I would recommend everyone do. I have the link in the description below, so you can go see his channel. But so give us a brief overview. I mean, not necessarily the details, but like what's going on with that?
It kind of started off with an atheist who was asking me why the pyramids predate the flood. And, that all depends on, when do you date the flood? Well, most creationists date the flood to a particular point in time, about 2350 BC. And the pyramids predate that, about 2550 or something. And so this atheist asked me, and I didn't really know what the answer was at the time, but then I found out later on that the Greek Septuagint has extra numbers on the ages. And at first I thought, the Greek Septuagint has just been changed, it's an altered text. But the more I started looking into it, it's not just the Greek Septuagint that has those numbers. The Samaritan Bible has them, and Josephus has them. And so it seemed to me, just looking at all the evidence, more than likely the original Hebrew included those numbers. And the Greek Septuagint is correctly reflecting the original Hebrew. And in today's present day, modern day Masoretic Hebrew text is probably the altered text. And the reason why I think that's most convincing is because I had always wondered, why is Shem outliving a bunch of his sons and his grandsons and his great grandsons? Why? And I could never figure out the answer to that. But when you follow the timeline in the Greek Septuagint with those extra 650 years, then each generation dies one after the other, exactly as you would expect it to. And so it just seemed to me that the more I spent time thinking about it, I was like, yeah, this is definitely the correct timeline. And so when you follow that timeline, it pushes the flood back 650 years. Right. And pushes it back before the flood. And it also fixes another issue with the Tower of Babel, that there wasn't enough time for the Tower of Babel to have populated in that amount of time. Well, it gives you more time for that population to happen. It increases the time between the flood and Babel. It increases it from 100 years to about 400. And so it gives you a lot more time for reproduction to happen. And so
it also puts a couple hundred years. It puts another 200 years then between that and between the Tower of Babel and essentially the start of the pyramids, right?
Yeah, and actually, in order to understand that, you have to figure out that the Patterns of Evidence movie, which that's what I have behind me, Patterns of Evidence, the Red Sea Miracle. I just put those up as a joke, actually, but they're still up there anyway. But the first Patterns of Evidence movie, called The Exodus, they explain there's a 200-year shift on the timeline. And when you understand that 200-year shift, then there's plenty of time in between in between the Tower of Babel and the pyramids. And so, there's plenty of time for them to have left Babel and go to Egypt and all that.
Well, and my understanding is that his timeline actually moves a lot of Egyptian history forward 200 years, right? It doesn't move it back 200 years.
Well,
moves it forward. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
According to Patterns of Evidence, of Evidence is moving Egyptian history forward. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
and the Greek Septuagint is pushing the flood back.
Right. So what
Yeah.
we have is instead of people saying, well, it happened here, we've got patterns of evidence, and that's amazing archaeology. They move all of Egyptian history closer to us by 250 years or 200 years. And the Septuagint is moving the flood back at 600 years or 600. Well, I guess it moves the flood back 400 years, but gives us an extra 650 years. I mean, there's just a lot more time there.
You kind of have to watch the video because
yeah,
you can't really explain it. That's the reason why I made the video, because you can't just tell somebody about it. They're going to misunderstand you. You have to see it visually. Mm-hmm. And that's why I made the video, because I'm like, every time I try to explain this to people, they're just like, huh?
Right. And that's what I love about your videos is that they really do, because it's a lot of these things are very visual concepts anyway. And that's how I learn. I look at it, it's like, okay, I can make sense of it if I can see it.
You got to see it. Yeah, you got to see it.
Right. And that's what I love about your videos is they make these ideas very concise and very accessible to people.
Yeah, well, I put a lot of hard work into making it that way.
No, and I think that, and again, everyone go watch some of his videos. I mean, they're particularly that one. That one I think is just really great. But you've got a lot of videos on there. And here's the thing, guys. There's no topic that's necessarily off topic. We're just chatting. It's a hangout. There's just a couple things I want to talk to him about because I think y'all would really appreciate it. So Titan's question, let me go ahead and pop it up.
Titan.
Yeah. Titan asks, he's asking both of us, does that tie in with Pangea? And that's basically the question. The rest of it is saying we can skip it if it doesn't tie in. Like I said, you can ask me what my favorite recipe is. I'll tell you, this is a hangout. We're not on topic tonight. Nathan, since you're the guest, I'll let you answer first if you have an opinion on that or not.
I don't know. I haven't really looked into it. Not really. But
that's fair.
I don't think that there was a Pangea. Pangea. I don't think there was a Pangea. I think it's nonsense. But but it is interesting that there's that thing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You know what I mean? And I wonder when the Bible says that there was water that came up from the deep. I'm like, oh. I mean, there's still water coming up out of those things, even at the Mariana Trench, you know.
So I don't know. 7 times. Well, there's 7 times the water in the Earth's crust, and you could let me phrase this: you could take all the water off the planet Earth and refill it 7 times with the water that's under the crust of the Earth.
Wow,
it's insane.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, no, we discovered. In fact, a lot of people have said, you know, they kind of tie. Not only does it tie into what we see in Scripture, as far as water, the flood, that kind of thing, it also ties in a little bit with people's mapping of sort of the Hebraic view of the afterlife, right? That you had this hot place of judgment, then there was this gulf. It's even in there's sort of aquatic words used, abyss. There's this abyss that's between them, and then you have this place of refreshing. And they're like, that's very much what you see in the Earth's crust. And again, everyone, you know, sort of says that it's there. So that's an interesting little tidbit, just something to think about. My opinion on this matter is that yes, Pangea was a real thing, and yes, the flood does tie into it, but it's the flood. Excuse me. It's the flood that separates it, right? Like you said, because we have this. If you look at it, there's this scar that seemingly runs.
Yeah, this big, huge scar. Yeah,
and I forget who in fact, I had a friend of mine, Mason, on a couple weeks ago on Tex's show, the crypto show that I do, the paranormal show that I do with Tex, and he remembered the dude's name who came up with this idea. But essentially, the point is when it talks about the gulfs or the fountains of the deep opening, that scar that runs across the planet, right, like the seam of a baseball, was the Earth breaking apart. And the water that was underneath the water that we use to fill the Earth now, it literally shot up out of it.
Yeah,
like it was
I think
like
that's
a
what
geyser.
I think the Ark Encounter teaches that.
Yeah,
I don't know how true that is.
Maybe. Well, we don't know. I mean, so this is where that's a great point, and this is why I agree with that interpretation until I get something else that says otherwise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's some really good, and there's a lot of good reasons for it, not just the that I think it also explains a lot of these meteorites that we find with organic matter on them, because they're actually from the Earth. They literally made escape velocity from the from the speed
Oh,
of
wow. I never thought about that before.
this ejection. Well, so here's the thing: like in Siberia, right? We have all these frozen mammoths that were instantly frozen, eat with fresh summer buttercups and grasses in their mouths, like they were instantly frozen. Like that is not like there is nothing in nature that could cause that, right?
Yeah. Other than
Unless
liquid nitrogen or something. I mean,
exactly.
yeah.
That's not natural.
But that's not
Exactly.
that's artificially made. Yeah.
Exactly. So it takes something massive, like the flood, to cause that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm of the opinion, just to answer Titan's question, that Pangea was a real thing. The flood is what breaks it up. Now that being said, I don't know that it necessarily moved the continents as much as we think. Right? I think it just. I do think it moved them, and that's where we get a lot of these mountain ranges. But it's also, I think, just mostly filled in. Well, we're just on the higher mounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it essentially just filled up the lower areas, and we're just living on the remnants. Is sort of my view. But yes, so Titan. The easy answer is yes. Pangea was a thing. And why am I showing Lamp of Light's question? There we are. Beta Aquari asks, is there any correlation with water erosion on the Sphinx? Maybe. Your thoughts? But Nathan, I think your point would be, I think you make this point in the video, that the limestone that the pyramids are built on have fossils in them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The thing with the Sphinx, though, is that has water damage at the base, and that's caused by the flooding of the River Nile. You know, a worldwide flood would completely destroy the Sphinx and bury the pyramids under, hundreds of feet of layer upon layer upon mud and sediment. And so, yeah, there is water erosion at the base of the Sphinx, but that's just because the River Nile is flooding. It's not because of the worldwide flood. People always bring that up, but water erosion on the base of the Sphinx is not water erosion on the top of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. There's nothing up there. There's nothing even on the top of the Sphinx, on the face of it, So
well, so I've read there was a great paper or article about the Sphinx having been reworked several times.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that and so it was their argument the head was originally a jackal, not a woman.
Really?
And so we've always assumed that it's like a lion, right? But one of the things they point out is, have you ever seen a lion sit like that? Have you ever seen any cat sit the way the Sphinx sits? And the answer to that is no. But a jackal or a dog, you have seen that. Like my little dog sits that way all the time. I see
what you're saying. Because the way that dogs sit down is a little bit different than the way that cats do. That's a good point. So maybe it was a jackal. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's a theory.
I'm not really. I haven't really looked into the Sphinx that much. I don't know much about it.
Yeah. Well, so here's the other thought, right? On that, particularly now that we have this extra period of time between flood and pyramids and people and all this, it's entirely possible that there have been some really catastrophic environmental shifts. Everyone focuses on the flood, right? But it's like, guys, a lot changed after the flood too. I wouldn't be surprised if Egypt was a lot wetter back in the day.
It probably was. Yeah, because deserts grow. You know what I mean? Yeah. Mm-hmm. There are places that used to be like lush green rainforest, and they become. I mean, think about it. Think about the Israelites. They said we're going to go out into the desert, as if to say Egypt is where they were and wasn't desert at that time. Which actually, the Goshen area is not desert even now. It's actually very green. It's even greener, I think, than America. Apparently.
Well, it depends on where. It just depends
in the Goshen area.
Yeah,
the water area.
But I mean, heck, America. Again, you look at America. America's a massive landmass. We have all kinds of varying different environments. But yeah, the point is, well, I mean, it's like Atlantis. When does Atlantis fall?
Yeah, right? Was that before or after the flood, or is it even real, or is it just a fable, or something? I don't know.
And what's interesting is they found this location in Africa. It's actually on the continent, and it seems to match up 1-to-1
to Atlantis.
To Atlantis with some really interesting points. I'll do a show and I'll let you know when it comes out. But it's really interesting. And a lot of people said, but it's not below the water. And they're like, well, Yeah, but that's only because we're sort of told from Plato that it's sunk beneath the waves. All that had to do is become uninhabitable, and then the myth that he gives us, it's, and they point out some other things as well. So it is, again, a lot of these things we also have to remember is their use of language versus what we think they're saying can often be two different things, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, because even in the English language, we have all sort of idioms.
Yeah.
Like if somebody's feeling under the weather, like, okay, so the weather's up there and you're down here. We have idioms that people aren't necessarily going to understand. You have to understand that language and that culture, and that's the same thing is true with Hebrew and a lot of things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So Titan follows up with, if Pangea was a thing, does that speed up the corruption by the Nephilim? Yeah, I think that it does, but I also think it speeds up the destruction of humanity by the flood. Because something I've been really sort of playing with is, since this is hang on, I was going to save it for the flood, and we'll probably talk about this in more detail when we get to the flood part, but one of the questions I have is, how do we get koalas in Australia post-flood? Like, even forget the time thing, right?
That's a question that a lot of people wonder about. Koalas and kangaroos. How'd they get to Australia? Because where did Noah's Ark land? In the mountains of Ararat, which is either in Turkey or Iran. I believe probably Iran. How'd they get to Australia? How'd that happen?
Right. Well, the thing is, it could have even been lower. Some people have speculated that it's not actually Ararat, but it's Ururat that it could be. But irrelevant. It's not that far away. Like, it's only a couple 100 miles. So it still doesn't get that poor drop bear into Australia. Because
drop bear? Like, you call it a drop bear?
Yeah, we call it a drop. Well, there's a long story behind that. But it's like, how do you get this poor little koala? And I have so many jokes in my head about the koala that is just not appropriate for this episode. But the thing is, they only eat eucalyptus. They literally can't eat anything else.
Really?
Oh yeah. No. What's worse? Here's the worst thing about the koala. Their brain is basically smooth, which means they literally can't think at all.
That's great.
It is. I mean, they are literally the dumbest mammal on the planet.
That's funny.
But so the thing is, like, if you were to take the eucalyptus off of a tree branch and put it in a bowl and give it to a koala, it wouldn't know what to do with the leaves.
Wow.
That's why anytime you see them, they feed it on a stick. Like, it's still on the branch, because they don't know what it is if it's not on the branch. So it's like, how do these two little koalas saunter from the Middle East all the way to Australia? And what, there's no eucalyptus, there's no nothing. Sloths. How do sloths? And the thing is, like, with the sloth,
and wouldn't the same thing be true of like alpacas in South America?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, okay, so alpacas are not as big a problem, because you can still have camel or cameloids come off the ark and just have them and have them go from, camels over here. Then because there were camels in North America, right?
Oh, they were. Okay.
Oh yeah, no, there were. So and then they adapt and become alpacas and llamas and whatever else, right? So that's not that big of a deal, but the problem still gets, with like the sloths. Why are sloths there? And the big things about, and I'm not just
focusing so on funny. It's the funniest animal,
aren't they?
They're so goofy.
Well, it's so
slow. Have you seen that? Have you seen that movie where the what is it? It's all animals, and they go to the DMV, and the people working in the DMV, they're all sloths.
Yes, yeah.
They call them
Zootopia. I got 3 kids. I assure you, have seen that film.
Yeah, what do they call this? They call him like Speedy something or whatever.
Yeah, his name was Flash. Yeah.
Flash, 100-yard dash. Yeah, he's like super slow.
Yeah, that is my favorite part of that entire movie. But yeah, no. So Cheese Freak, we're coming to that. What's
Cheese Freak talking about?
So she says, well, wouldn't God just not place the animals everywhere after the flood? Well, but we don't see that in Scripture, right? It doesn't say that God reaches down and moves all the animals, right?
Okay, I just got to say, this question is so funny. Where did all the sand come from?
Okay, I think I missed that one. Hold
I
up.
love that. I think, what is it? Lamp of Light?
Yeah.
It makes me think of that the third Aladdin movie where he says, "This broadcast is brought to you by sand. It's
Sand.
everywhere.
Yeah,
Get used to it."
pretty much. So it's called desertification. There's a real answer to that, but I forget what it is. It's a geological thing. Sand is actually created. Like it's just it's granite that's been broken down. And that's why you get different colored sand in different areas. It's the color of the granite that it destroys. Granite and some other stuff that makes sand. And the thing is, if you don't have an environment, this is why they can grow. If you don't have an environment where the plant life can sort of keep the soil where it needs to be, right? Then what'll happen is the weather patterns, like as the plant life dies and that topsoil's gone, well, a lot of moisture is actually removed from the air because plants, trees, they keep moisture in the air, and so it allows the environment to change more rapidly, and so you get to these base sections of the earth where you start getting to that bedrock and that granite, and it just starts getting eroded, and that becomes sand, and that's why you can have desertification.
I did not know that. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, and a lot of it actually comes from the ocean also, because what happens is that sand is brought ashore. Now a lot of these man-made beaches get destroyed because of the movement of the tide, but like we get sand here in Texas from Africa.
What, really?
Like,
from Africa?
oh, absolutely.
Because of the comes it through the ocean or something?
Jet stream. It gets into the atmosphere.
Jet stream. Atmosphere. Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
people were like, they made a big deal about it last year, and I'm like, they were talking about. I'm like, guys, this happens every year. Like, this is not a big thing. Like, this happens all the time. Now, the last one was bigger than usual, but I'm like, it happens all the time.
Okay, I just got a question. Yeah. Why is Cheese Freak? Why is Cheese Freak such a cheese freak? I mean, what's your favorite cheese or something?
Okay, hold on. Yes. So Cheese Freak, what is your favorite cheese? Like, what are we being freaks? What cheese specifically are you being a freak about? Because I love cheese. Like, I love me some cheese, but
I saw this this album once. It was called Cheeses of Nazareth. Cheeses of Nazareth.
I'm not talking to you anymore. Weird. All right, so hold on. I saw a question, and I'm trying to mix it. So that's where all the sand came from. If you like, olives are okay. So here's the thing: I hate olives, but I've been told if you want an olive, you go to the Middle East. Like they do, it's fresh. It doesn't taste like anything you've ever had. But I'm not an olive fan, so I'm not going to tell you.
Well, I believe that black olives matter.
Well, this was a fun channel while we had it. So many jokes. Hold on. Oh my gosh, so many jokes. They're the lush forest. So that's the thing is our environment has rapidly changed. And they said a flood would have caused an ice age. I think it probably did.
That's what a lot of creationists say that there was an ice age that came after the flood, and that's one of the reasons why you would think there would be some more years in there. But the main thing for me with the Greek Septuagint timeline is that if you look at the timeline as the way it is in the Hebrew Masoretic text, I might even have a picture of this somewhere. Let me look for it while I'm talking. But basically, if you follow the Hebrew Masoretic text, then you get all kinds of really, really, really weird things. Like Hebrew, Abraham dies at 175 years of age, right?
Right.
And it says that he died old and full of years. He didn't die prematurely. He didn't die because of war or disease. He died of old age. He died old and full of years. But according to the Hebrew Masoretic text, in the year that Abraham died, his great-great-great-great-grandfather Heber is still chugging away at over 460 years of age.
Right.
Really? how is Abraham old and full of years at 175 while there's a 460-year-old man living around the corner? I mean, that would be like if my grandfather was still chugging away at 95 years of age, and say I die at 35. And somebody says, I died old and full of years at 35 years of age, while grandpa's still chugging away at 95.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
And
particularly if there were still a lot of people living 200 or 300 years at that time, because we have to assume it's not just the patriarchs who are living this long; it's everyone who is living this long.
Yeah. And so when you follow the Hebrew, when you follow the Greek Septuagint that has those extra 100 years on those 6 generations, then it stretches it out in such a way to where Heber died about 500 years before Abraham died. And so in Heber's generation, people really were living into their 400s. But then centuries later, about 5 centuries later in Abraham's generation, the age of man had been cut short by that point in time. So by that point in time, people were only living into their late 100s. So it does make sense that Abraham was old and full of years in his generation. Okay, not in Heber's generation. That would be young. Yeah. And so it makes a lot more sense. And that's actually the thing that convinced me before I even made the connection with the pyramids and the flood. I didn't even connect that with the pyramids and the flood until after, like later on. I thought, oh, wait a minute, this atheist had asked me that question about the pyramids and stuff. And I thought, oh, hey, maybe this issue with the timeline, with the genealogy, maybe that actually answers his question. So I started looking into it and looking at all these atheist arguments, looking at their websites, asking questions on Yahoo Answers, and looking at videos and everything, just trying to find out what is their argument. I found that they do have a legitimate argument, but I have a legitimate answer, and it's found in the Greek Septuagint.
Yeah, the problem is that we've been reading a corrupted text. And we've talked, one of the big things we talk about a lot on this channel is Deuteronomy 32. The Masoretic text reads that, after the Tower of Babel, everyone was broken up according to the children of Israel, right? Because there's 70 that go into Egypt, right? Initially, that's why the number 70 shows up a lot. But in the Septuagint, it says, according to the sons of God, which, and the big thing about that is it ties very much into the divine council idea, where what happened is God divorces humanity and gave humanity over to these other spirits. They were probably not fallen at the time, but he gives them over to these spirits, like, you be their gods. And then that's why Abraham becomes important, is that he pulls Abraham out for his portion. And so it becomes this, so he becomes this kingdom. That's what the whole thing is. He's reclaiming humanity from these other spirits and giving them away back into his grace. So yeah, I think the simple fact of the matter is, and you do a great job of showing how certain areas where the Masoretic text was corrupted, and we'll talk about why that's important here in a second. It's a hold on, because there were a couple questions I wanted to hit real quick. Because Lamp of Light, there's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid people. Okay, it's a pun off the joke.
What if that is a stupid question? Asking if there's such a thing as a stupid question.
It's a stupid question.
What if that's a stupid question?
What if that is the stupid question? All right, there you go. Now I got to think about that one. So yeah, Ice Age. But okay, so why does the Bible call the Dead Sea, right? And so here's the thing. I don't think it was the Dead Sea before Sodom and Gomorrah. I think it's after Sodom and Gomorrah that it really becomes the Dead Sea. But the thing is,
it was alive at one point in time. Yeah, it became more salty over time. Yeah,
exactly. And so the thing is that we have to remember, though, in the entirety of the book of Genesis and the early parts of Exodus actually all of Exodus is written. That's all past tense for them, right? Because Moses doesn't start really writing the history of what we would now call Genesis, Exodus. He doesn't start writing any of that until Mount Sinai, which I believe is Jabal al-Lawz in Saudi Arabia. But it's not.
I don't know if a lot of the people on your channel know about that, but
well, we'll come to it.
Patterns of Evidence. They're going to cover that. That's going to be their next movie.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. They're going to do the Mount Sinai.
Dude, I will flat out tell everyone this. If I got a chance to spend like you can't even do Jabal laws anymore. So I don't know how they're going to be able to do it because you can't get there. Saudi Arabia has blocked that off.
Really?
Oh yeah, they'll shoot you. They don't. They know what it is. They don't want anyone going there. But because the problem is, the Muslim world doesn't want anything archaeologically to prove the stories of the Hebrew, even though it's in their texts, right?
Yeah, it's in
They
their
don't
own
want that.
Quran. Yeah,
it's in the Quran, but they don't want that because they're afraid it would actually secure modern Israel's existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Okay,
there's a
I
great
see. They don't want that.
YouTube right now. You can go see Simi Yakovich. He's the naked archaeologist. He did a video with James Cameron. Like, geez, it's probably been 20 years now. We're all getting old, dude. About this, and he's talking about Avaris being like, he makes the claim like when the actual Exodus occurs, he makes some great, and even if he's off by what Patterns of Evidence says, he shows Avaris was Goshen, like that's where people lived. Then he shows the Jews, he shows the signet ring that actually shows Joseph's name.
Oh
right?
wow,
Like,
the signet. They found the signet ring.
Well, it's one of several signet rings because
That's so cool.
Like it's a great. If I can find it, I will put it in the description, and I'll send it to you because it's a great video. Like I love that. I love that video.
You know what's really interesting about Avaris is in Exodus it says that they were building the store cities of Pithom and Ramesses. Well, guess what?
Yeah,
Pithom was a store city.
Yeah,
Ramesses was not a store city. You know that?
No.
Ramesses was the capital city. It was where they had the Pharaoh's palace. It wasn't a city that was devoted to warehousing purposes, right? Mm-hmm. It's like saying that Washington, D.C. is a big warehouse or something.
It probably is.
Ramesses was not a store city, but the city underneath it was. The older city of Avaris, which Ramesses was later. Yeah, Ramesses and Avaris originally were next to one another, and Avaris was abandoned by everybody who lived there. So it became basically a ghost town. And then the neighboring city of Ramesses got bigger and bigger and eventually enveloped the older city. So Ramesses is essentially built on top of Avaris. Yeah. And so if the Bible says they were building a store city, but Ramesses is not a store city, but the city underneath it was, well, then it's probably the city underneath it that they were building. One thing I compare this to is one time I was walking out of Hy-Vee. My mom had come into town and was visiting me, and we had gone to this grocery store called Hy-Vee. And as we're walking out, I said to my mom, I was like, I used to work here. And she said, really? You used to work at Hy-Vee? I didn't know that. I said, no, I used to work here. Before they built Hy-Vee, this was a grocery store called Cohen's Furniture. And that's where I worked. And then they tore it down and they built the Hy-Vee in that place. I used to work here. Yeah. And so when the Bible says they were building a store city at Ramesses, it's saying they were building a store city here. It's not saying
no, exactly.
It's not saying they were building Ramesses at this time. It's saying they were building the store city in this place.
Right, because Avaris would have meant nothing to them.
Because it didn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it didn't exist anymore. Yeah. So again, this goes right back to the Red Sea, or to the Dead Sea rather. Because it was alive at that point. You have the destruction of the Tower of Sodom and Gomorrah. We have all this. It becomes the Dead Sea, but by the time Moses is writing, it's the Dead Sea. So what he's doing is he's using the more modern name for the location, which is something we do all the time. Think about it. We talk about when Columbus, came to America, or when the Pilgrims came to America. The Pilgrims didn't come to America. It was a wilderness, but we call it America, right? Because we're using the modern name, so we know where it was. Yes. Same thing. Yes. And by the way, guys, they've put all of now. If you have Amazon Prime, you can find all the Naked Archaeologist videos on that. But they've also uploaded them onto YouTube, as well as Monster Quest, America Unearthed. That's all on YouTube. Like, I'm having a real hard time justifying my subscription to DirecTV right now, because it's like I don't watch it anymore, like at all, because all the best stuff's on YouTube. Like,
it's crazy how there's so many streaming services now.
Yeah. Oh, it's
And
insane.
it's just, I mean, I'll subscribe to one for like a month and then cancel it because I'm not going to subscribe to like everything at once. Forget it.
Yep. No, exactly. Well, it's like you watch what you want to watch, and then you get rid of it, and then you just re-up it later when the thing you want to watch is back.
Right? Yeah.
I mean,
exactly. That's the
like
best thing to do.
Exactly. It's like, guys, this whole streaming thing is a bad. Well, except for Hulu. I like Hulu, but that makes sense because what they're doing is it's television. But you have commercials. Like it's not just subscriptions they're paying for it.
I don't like the commercials on Hulu. That's annoying to me. It's like you're paying and yet you get commercials.
Well, but here's the thing.
I don't get it.
I get it, but here's the thing. It's the same thing with like cable, right? You're paying for cable.
Yeah.
But there's commercials. The thing about Hulu is I get it because that actually makes it more sustainable. So that's why I don't mind. It. So by the way, so apparently Cheese Freak loves cheddar, which I do too. I'm an extra sharp. I'm an extra sharp cheddar guy. Mm-hmm. Like I will actually I'll let my cheddar get warm so it has that flavor. By the way, and I said earlier, I'd mentioned this. Kerry's Gold Irish. It's like an Irish cheese. They make an extra sharp cheddar that is amazing.
Are you Irish?
I'm Scottish.
You're Scottish. Do you celebrate St. Patrick's Day? Because that's coming up.
It is coming up, and no, because as all good Scots, we look down on the Irish.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a friend of mine, I kid you not, every St. Patrick's Day, she sends me the same meme. It's like it's been around for years now, and it's a guy. He looks actually shockingly like me when I've lost 100 pounds, which end of the year I will have. But he's got blue paint, like he's gone full Braveheart, and it says, "Everyone becomes a little Irish on St. Patrick's Day," and then the bottom says, "Except for the Scots, we stay Scottish." She sends it to me every year. It's like that's her favorite thing in the world to do.
It's crazy what people do. You know, they're celebrating the life of a Christian missionary by going out and getting drunk.
Sounds legit.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make sense.
All right. Well, Jesus is risen from the grave. Quick, hide the eggs. Like,
yeah. That one guy.
Yeah.
It's like Easter, the day Jesus rose from the dead. What are we going to do to celebrate? How about eggs? What does that have to do with Jesus? Oh, okay. We'll hide them.
Yeah, hide them, paint them. Say they come from chickens, or say they come from rabbits. Why? So he doesn't take the chickens.
Yeah. Passover actually represents Jesus. You know.
Yeah.
The Passover lamb and everything.
All of the feasts do.
Yeah.
That's what, like, at some point I'm going to do a study, probably on one of these Sundays, about the feasts, because if you understand the feasts, you understand the entirety of biblical history.
Oh, that's cool. See, I don't understand a lot of it. Trumpets and tabernacles and all that. Passover, I get Passover,
that's the best part. Yeah. Well, no, that's the best part. Yeah. No, that's all. See, here's the thing. Each feast is a prophecy of what's going to come, right?
I get that. I just didn't know how it's fulfilled.
Right. So, and that's like, I'll do a study on it and I'll let you know. There you go. So if you got if you know what the last three are, I think you know how the last 7 years rolls out. Someone's hobby should not be arguing with Christians, but here's the thing. The reason atheists like to argue with Christians is because they're actually fighting for their own conscience, because their conscience is telling them God's real. See, that's the thing I've learned. I had to realize this. People who hate God are God haters. That's why the Holy Spirit has to redeem us, because they hate God. They're not arguing because they don't believe God exists. They know he exists deep down.
How can you hate something that doesn't exist? Oh, I'm just so angry with Darth Vader right now.
Exactly. I have never been so angry at a fictional character that I've argued with people over it. That's the point. They really do, and they know. The problem is the first person you lie to is yourself.
I mean, when Thanos snapped away half the universe, I kind of took that personally a little bit.
Dude, I'm the only one in the theater when that happened who did this. It was like, they did it! Because, like, dude, that was such a key element in the comics. I'm like, I went into that theater thinking there's no way on the earth they're going to do this right. Like, they're not going to do it. And they did. And I'm like,
really?
They even did the white. I was like,
I didn't even know. I'm not a comic reader, so I didn't know what they're gonna do. I had no clue.
Oh,
what was
dude,
going to happen.
I was so thrilled. Everyone else is like, no, and I'm like, yeah. It's like I'm over here like, guys, this is a 30-year-old comic. I assure you, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like,
But back to the topic, though. Yeah, atheists.
Yeah.
They're mad at. They're angry with God.
Mm-hmm.
And you know
exactly.
The reason why that atheist had
please.
asked me that question about the pyramids and the flood is because I had actually sent him a video that I made about unicorns. You see, basically there was a college student who had asked me. He was actually the president of the atheist organization on his college, and he asked me about unicorns in the Bible.
So many jokes there. Mm-hmm.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so he asked me about unicorns in the Bible, and I didn't have the answer.
I'm just gonna hold on to this.
So later on, I found the answer, and I made a video about it, and I wanted to see if he thought that was a legitimate answer. Well, I didn't know where he was, and so I thought, well, I want to get some atheist feedback on it, so I sent it to a whole bunch of atheists on YouTube. I sent the video to him. I said, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think this answers the question? And he responded back. One of those atheists responded back to me with a video response. They gave me a video response. And I didn't even know about it until somebody pointed it out to me, because they were looking for my channel and they found this video response to me. And he had said, okay, yeah, the unicorn in the Bible, it's probably a rhinoceros, whatever. It sounds like a legitimate answer. But there's so many other problems you got to answer, you know. You got to explain the pyramids predate the flood, but they don't got any water damage. And he said, the Tower of Babel event was only about 100 years or so after the flood. So you got 8 people coming off the ark, and only 100 years later, you've got thousands of people building this big, gigantic tower. He said, well, how long were women pregnant for? 3 weeks? And I thought, well, no, obviously they weren't pregnant for only 3 weeks. Obviously it was normal 9-month pregnancies. But I thought, what is making him think that the women would have to be pregnant for only 3 weeks in order for the population to have gotten large enough, fast enough? And I didn't really know what to think about it. I didn't honestly spend a lot of time thinking about it. But it was after I found out the change in the timeline with the Greek Septuagint that I thought, oh my goodness, could this actually fix the problem that this guy's talking about? And I looked into it and tried to understand population growth rates and tried to figure out, well, when did the Tower of Babel happen? How soon after the flood did it happen? How fast can a population grow anyway? How many people would you need to build the tower? Just all of those details, because he didn't share any details. You know what I mean? He's just like, it's not possible. And so, well, you can't just sit there and say it's not possible. Give me the details. Explain to me in detail why it's not possible. Anyway, so I found that the timeline in the Greek Septuagint completely fixes the problem that he was bringing up. And that's one of the reasons why I made the video. It was really a response to that guy. I don't know where he is because he deleted his video. I can't even. I wanted to use his video in my video, but I can't because he deleted it. I should have downloaded it, darn it. And so it was really in response to these questions that atheists were asking. And it's got 1.3 million views now. It's super popular. But it was just an atheist asked a question, and I'm like, hey, I found the answer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but and not only did you find the answer, you found me through it, and I can't think of a greater blessing in your life.
Okay, how did we? I don't remember. So I knew somebody that you knew, or
so somehow Tim McLean knew you. And he went to the church that
I was probably friends with him on Facebook at some point.
Facebook, in time, and he's like, hey, and so I shared your video. That's what it was. I had shared your video because I found your video, and I thought, okay, this is a great video. So I shared it, and he's like, by the way, I know this guy.
No.
And that's how we ended up finding each other. And yes, he is actually a jackalope. He doesn't just look like one.
Okay, here's an interesting question. Nathan, is there a question that an atheist has posed to you that you still or have struggled with? Well, I definitely don't have all the answers in the universe, that's for sure. But yeah, I still don't know why there's 3 names missing from the genealogy in Matthew. I mean, I believe there is an answer, but I don't know what it is yet. So yeah.
Okay, that reminds me. I have to do a little more research. Aaron, is it Aaron Rude? Michael Rude. He actually there's a discrepancy in one of the genealogies. I think it's the one in Matthew. That it's a discrepancy with one of the other genealogies, and he actually has an answer for that. And basically goes back to the idea that Matthew was originally written in Hebrew and then translated into Greek.
Yeah, and he does some things with what's his name, that Jewish guy.
Yeah. As far as he has a great video on why, and I agree with his Nehemiah. That's him. Yeah, Nehemiah. About
Nehemiah Gordon. That's his name. Yeah. Nehemiah Gordon. He calls himself Nehemiah, but it's Nehemiah Gordon.
Yeah.
Nehemiah Gordon. I know him by that pronunciation of it.
Okay,
but yeah, the idea that Matthew was in Hebrew originally.
It's his name. But yeah, he's actually Matthew was in Hebrew originally. He gets translated into Greek, and that caused a change in the genealogy. But it doesn't explain the 3 missing names.
Yeah. And by the way, it's actually 4 missing names. But because of my video I made about Jeconiah, the curse of Jeconiah, now I realize there's not 4 missing names. There's only 3 missing names. So I still have yet to figure that out.
Right. But he's also the one that points out that we know that he shows how we can prove that Yehovah is the actual name, not Yahweh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting and excellent article. A friend of mine, though, I think had the best response, which is it's 4 consonants and we don't know what the vowels are. Like it's our best guess anyway.
Some people they get all caught up in what the name's supposed to be and how it's supposed to be pronounced, and I'm just like, I don't really care. Yeah. People make such a big deal about it. I mean, the third commandment says don't. The third commandment says don't use the Lord's name in vain. Well, what name are people using in vain?
Right.
Right. The name that they're using is probably the one that we're. I don't know. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
What curse word? What god are people using as a curse word in movies?
Exactly. Exactly. Ain't no one being like, well, Buddha.
Or the name Yahshua or Yehoshua or whatever weird cults call him, nobody's using that as a cuss word.
Yeah.
Well,
and what they use is the title, but again, just because in English, that's what we've come to do it with.
Yeah.
But I think his argument about it being I just forgot it. Instead of Yahweh, it being how did I forget it? Oh my gosh, I've been awake too long. Darn it, you throw me off with your Jehoshua and Nehemiah. Now it's all one big.
Give me the idea of what you're trying to say.
Yehovah. There we go.
Yehovah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think his argument for it being Yehovah versus Yahweh is excellent.
Yeah.
And by the way, Titan. In fact, if you go into the description, there is a link to his channel, so you can view his work and point and laugh when appropriate.
Okay, this person's asking, do you think Esther is real historical story? Yeah. Why wouldn't I? Okay, I mean, there are people who think it's not.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. I mean, there's someone who's going to say that not every story, that a lot of these are mythological. There's no reason to think Esther
I'm going to share my channel with you guys. I'll post the link to my channel.
Please. Yeah, go ahead and post the link in the chat. But it is in the description for those who are watching later. It is in the description. Lamp of Light. Yeah, people always blame Christians for mass killing. So here's the thing. And this is probably the entire episode unto itself. Truth be told, religious people don't. I mean, everyone likes to point to the Catholic Church. It's not really a thing for death. Even like the Spanish Inquisition was like 2,000 people over a 200-year period, which is terrible and awful, but that's like 20 people. It's like 20 people a year. Like it really wasn't. It isn't the mass destruction that political structures cause. Like everyone points to, it's like, look at all the misery of religion. And I'm like, guys, look at the misery of politicians. Look at the misery caused by socialism over the last 100 years. Like, Don't even talk to me. It's an excuse, is what it is. It's just an excuse it's a fig leaf to cover their hatred of God. Ginger Freak, you were here. You said, Jason, the last 3 feasts. Tell us that, Ginger Freak, you were here for the Revelation study. I don't want to hear it. You know. And if not, there's a book you can buy. Yes, we will go through the feasts individually, though. There was something earlier up here. Yes, Gene, I know that Hulu is only a couple dollars more for no commercials, but I'm not willing to pay that.
Dude, get the bundle. The Disney bundle. That's what's worth it. If you like ESPN.
But I don't. I don't care about ESPN. I don't care about sports. So, yeah, I'm not about to get that bundle. I am. And so here's the thing. Like, they just got through with WandaVision, but it's like, here's the thing. I'm looking at HBO Max. Like, that's got Mortal Kombat coming out. I'm so ready for that. It's got the Snyder Cut coming out for Justice League. It's got Godzilla versus King Kong. I'm looking more at HBO Max. I'm like, I think I'm going to get that for a couple months, then drop that.
Falcon Winter Soldier is just next Friday.
Yeah, I know, and I can watch it eventually. I don't know. I just kind of want to.
Honestly, it's probably better if you wait. If you just wait for it all to be released and just watch it at once. It's probably the best thing to do anyway.
Exactly. Well, okay, so here's the other thing, right? Hold on. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm trying to make sure we don't miss.
Ooh, somebody just asked a good question. Nathan, who do you say Melchizedek was?
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Okay. So, because that really ties into our conversation here, right?
Yeah, that ties in.
But let me wrap this question up, and then because it's completely off topic, and I want to end on that. That's sort of a great question.
Did you want to talk about Tobit at all?
We can. No? I mean, let's answer about Chesedek, then let's talk about Tobit, because I got nowhere to go. Here's my problem.
Honestly, I could do this for hours. I don't care.
Oh, I know. Well, so could I, but my daughter wants me to take her driving.
Okay.
Yeah, she's 15. She's got her learner's permit, and she just finished class. So
okay,
yeah. So I got to do that at some point tonight. So here's my problem with Disney, right? Like, so much of their stuff is primed for China, and like at the end of this Mulan remake that they did, they thanked the Xinjiang province, which is the group that is actually running the Uyghur Muslim camps. Those concentration camps. I'm like, Disney, what the heck are you doing? Like, you're getting they actually do special filmings and edits for their Chinese releases of like the Avengers stuff to promote stuff in China. So like there's the scene, I forget which movie it was, where Robert Downey Jr. was drinking Chinese milk. Like, you can tell that's exactly what he's drinking. Yeah. They had filmed that specifically because China was like, hey, and I had forgotten about this because there was this huge thing where everyone was going from China to Australia, and they were bringing back these suitcases of powdered milk because at some point because again, they're communists, a bunch of the ranchers and milk producers realized they could put this it was like a plastic into the milk so it's like you only had like say 100,000 gallons of milk, you could get like 125 or 150 out of it by thinning it out with this plastic, and people are getting sick from it. So they asked Disney Marvel to film. They were like, hey, we want him to show it so it would promote Chinese milk so that people would think it was safe.
Oh,
so God. I'm honestly, I've got a little bit of a thing going on with Disney right now, and after Gina Carano, I'm like, dude,
the Gina Carano situation, that's so wrong. I was looking forward to Rangers of the New Republic.
I know.
And then she, and Jon Favreau wrote the part for her. And he wasn't offended. He wasn't offended by what he's Jewish. Jon Favreau is Jewish. He wasn't offended by what he was mad that they fired her because he's not happy. Her. And then guess who hires her after she got fired? The Orthodox Jew, Ben Shapiro.
Dude, I listen to Shapiro all the time. When he came out with that, I'm like, well, so here's the thing, right? It's like I think we do need to start canceling these things and be like, look, if y'all are going to do this, if you're going to be this way, then I'm not going to give you my money. Yeah. That's like I said, that's my big thing about Disney Plus. I'm like, I don't know that I want them to have my money. I mean, I really don't. It's like, if you're going to be this way, then then you don't
Just
get me as
wait
a client.
wait till the show is fully released, and then create a
Mhm.
new email, and then get a free trial and watch it, and then cancel.
I'm not saying I'm not gonna do that. Okay, so Melchizedek.
Melchizedek.
Yeah. So this actually ties in directly to the timeline thing, because a lot of Jewish rabbis have said that Melchizedek was actually Shem, because in the Masoretic text, Shem is alive during Abraham's life, right? Yeah. If we use the Masoretic text, but during the Septuagint, he's not.
Yeah, in the Septuagint, he can't be, because Shem died like 500 years before Abraham was even born. So you can't have Shem and Melchizedek be the same person. But in Titus and Timothy, Paul warns them and says, "Hey, don't give heed to genealogies. Don't argue over genealogies or give heed to Jewish fables." So in Titus, he says, "Don't talk about what? Genealogies, Jewish fables." And then to Timothy, don't talk about genealogies, Jewish fables, right? Yep. Why is it that the genealogies and the Jewish fables are always going together? What's going on here? Well, it's because what the Jewish rabbis did is they removed years out of the genealogy, the 650 years that I was talking about, to compress the genealogy in such a way to where now Shem is alive the same time as Abraham. And that promotes their fable that they had made up about Shem and Melchizedek being the same person. And you can find that fable in books like the Book of Jasher and other pseudepigraphal, which is basically fictional fables. Basically, they're fables. They're fictional stories.
Yeah, so we've talked about the Book of Jasher being a middle. It comes from Spain. It was written in the Middle Ages. Like, we know it's a Middle Age forgery.
So you've got the Jewish rabbis were corrupting the genealogies in their attempt to support the Jewish fable about Shem being Melchizedek. And the reason why they wanted Shem to be Melchizedek is because it helped to disprove what the Christians were saying about Jesus being the new high priest. Because basically, the Christians were saying that Jesus is our new high priest, and the Jews are like, he can't be. He's from the tribe of Judah. Right, you got to be of the tribe of Levi, right? You got to be a descendant of Aaron. And by the way, the Maccabees could prove that they were descendants of Aaron, and Ezra could prove that he was a descendant of Aaron. Well, Jesus wasn't in the lineage of the Levites. So how could Jesus be the new high priest? And so Paul makes the point in Hebrews. He says that even though Jesus is of the tribe of Judah, it doesn't matter, because he's of a different priesthood, a higher, superior priesthood, the priesthood of Melchizedek. Because the lower priesthood, which is Levi, actually paid tithes to Melchizedek, proving that Melchizedek is the greater priesthood, because Levi was in the loins of Abraham at that time. And so what the Jews argue, the Jewish rabbis argue, is that, wait a minute, no, Melchizedek's priesthood is not a higher, superior priesthood. It's actually the same priesthood. And we know that because Melchizedek handed off his priesthood to Abraham, and then Abraham handed it down to Isaac, and then to Jacob, and then to Levi, and ultimately down to Aaron. So no, it's not a superior, higher priesthood. It's the same priesthood. No, it's a completely different priesthood. Because think about it. Yeah. Were the Levites kings? The Levites weren't kings, were they?
No, that's actually a big point, was that God separated the religious.
Yeah, they were separated. But Melchizedek was both king and priest, wasn't he? It's a different priesthood. And so that's what Paul was making the point of in Hebrews, is that Jesus is of a different, superior, higher priesthood. And also Hebrews says that it says that Melchizedek had no father and no mother, no genealogy, no beginning of days, no end of life. Now, what does that mean? Did it mean that he didn't have a father or mother, or that we just don't know who his father and mother is, and we can't prove his genealogy? We can't prove he's from Levi.
Right.
Either way, whether he's saying that he's this, I don't know, angelic being who has no father and mother, or whether he's just saying that we just don't know what his father and mother, we know who Shem's father and mother are.
Yeah,
his father's
exactly.
Noah.
That's the point, right?
We know what his genealogy is. Shem is not Melchizedek. That's nonsense. Okay, and
By
And
the way,
you know,
this has inspired me. Tomorrow will be about Melchizedek.
oh, okay.
I was actually trying to figure out. I'm like, I was tossing around a couple ideas for what tomorrow should be, but I'm like, you know what? None of it really spoke to me. This speaks to me because your whole point, and I think this, because what you're arguing against, and I think it's a great thing, so I can point back to this, so I don't have to deal with it on tomorrow, is that he's not Shem, and that's an argument I think a lot of people don't run across anymore. But if you read a lot of rabbis, they'll tell you that Shem and Melchizedek are the same, which they use to modern.
They're
I've heard people do it.
This is the nail in the coffin. This disproves. Yeah, they use that, and you know, and people want to like make the argument and say, "Oh, that's such a stupid argument," because you have to argue that you know, the Jews somehow intercepted the letter to the Hebrews. You know, intercepted the letter to the Hebrews before it was delivered or something. It's like, no, the Jews wouldn't have to intercept the letter of Hebrews, because what the author of Hebrews says in that letter is probably something that was spoken at multiple sermons in multiple cities, probably even before the book of Hebrews was written. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the other thing that we seem to forget. And Tim Pool had said this on his show a while back, and it really rang home to me. He said, we see history as is compressed, right? Because first of all, Cheese Freak, you should always be excited for Sunday, because I'm always here, and that's enough reason to be excited. So
what do you do this every day then?
Not every day. No,
every day.
We're live every Thursday and every Sunday.
Okay. So, but sometimes you just do it.
Yeah, this is a hangout.
More than one day. Okay.
Yeah, no, just a hangout. But no, he says history is compressed. So we think about the revolution, right? We think of it as a very short period of time. But if you really if you were to put it on a timeline, you realize that like there's 20 years of events that we call the revolution, right? When we're talking about the formation of early Christianity, the effect, you know, the fact, and again, lots of early Christian writers talked about how the rabbis had changed scriptures.
Oh yeah, lots of early church fathers talked about that. Justin Martyr and Irenaeus. And by the way, if you watch the video that I made called "Were the Pyramids Built Before the Flood?" in that video, I basically say that I think that there's an extra 650 years that belongs in the timeline. Eusebius, if you know who he is, he's a church father, more of a church historian. He's from the 4th century,
but very early,
very early 4th century, like early 300s. And he talks about the genealogies in the Hebrew and the Greek and the Samaritan Bibles, and he compares them, and he defends the Greek Septuagint. He says the Greek Septuagint has an extra 650 years, and that's more accurate, and it correctly reflects the original Hebrew. He says that the Greek Septuagint was translated from old and accurate Hebrew copies. But he says that the Jewish Hebrew that the present-day Jews are using, the present day of his day, which is in the 300s, he's saying that the Hebrew Bible that the Jewish people are using now, it's untrustworthy and unreliable. They changed it. And he defends the Greek Septuagint. And he says one of the reasons why, not the only reason why, but one of the reasons why we should use the Greek Septuagint is because this is the version of the Bible that Jesus and the apostles handed down to us. And this is the version that the early churches, that the churches around the world are using. Now, how does Eusebius know that all the churches around the world are using the Greek Septuagint? How does he know that? Did he go and visit every single church that existed throughout Asia, Africa, and Europe? You know, with the technology they had back then, riding on the backs of camels and horses. Did he go to every church around the world and make sure that they're all using the Greek Septuagint? No, but you know what he did? He attended the Council of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea was the very first ecumenical church council. What does ecumenical mean? It means worldwide or universal, meaning that the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD was the first time they had a worldwide church council that involved hundreds of church leaders from almost every church around Asia, Africa, and Europe. They were all there. Eusebius would have met them. He would have talked with them. He would have sat down and ate with them. He would have discussed scripture with them and discussed doctrine, debated doctrine with them, right? he's going to know what version of if you go to a big concert, you can see what version of the Bible is being used by the person sitting next to you. Or if somebody gets up to speak and they're reading from the Bible, they'll tell you like, okay, I'm going to read from the New King James. And, Eusebius would have known what version of the Bible that these people are using. And he says they're all using the Greek Septuagint, all of them. Now, some people spoke Latin, but they were using Latin translations of the Greek Septuagint. Yeah. And Augustine backs him up on that.
And here's the other thing. Well, it just makes sense because the Greek Septuagint would have been the most popular because everyone spoke Greek.
Well, even when Latin started to become a dominant language, you basically had it to where mostly in the East they were speaking Greek, and then mostly in the West they were speaking Latin. Yeah. And so when Latin started to become a dominant language, you have out of all these churches throughout Asia, Africa, and Europe, you've got Greek-speaking churches and you've got Latin-speaking churches. The Greek-speaking churches were using the Greek Septuagint, and the Latin-speaking churches were using Latin translations of the Greek Septuagint. They were all using the Septuagint. And this is something that Augustine says in his book called City of God. If you ever buy Augustine's book, Augustine lived back in the 4th century. And he lived in probably more the late 4th century, so a little bit after the time of Eusebius. But he says in his book, they're all using the Septuagint. And actually, the word Septuagint means the Latin word, because Septuagint is a Latin word. Septua means 7, and genta means 10 in Latin. So it basically means 7 times 10, the translation of the 70, because it was known as the translation of the 70 translators. And so, they were all using the Greek Septuagint. And people say, well, the reason why they were using Greek is because they spoke Greek. So, they had a corrupt translation, but it's what they used. No. They used the Greek Septuagint because they didn't trust the Hebrew. The reason why they had Latin translations of the Septuagint rather than Latin translations of the Hebrew is because they didn't trust the Hebrew. And they said so multiple times on multiple occasions. Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Eusebius, and so many others said, we don't trust the Hebrew that the Jews are using. We think they changed it. We trust the Greek Septuagint, which was translated by Jews in the centuries before Christ. But the problem is there's so many people, they don't know. They don't know what Eusebius said. They haven't bothered to look into it. They don't know what Justin Martyr said. People don't know this history of the church because they're like, oh, I got my King James Bible and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what the early church said.
Well, the problem is, I've mentioned this before on this channel, but I think it's something I go back to is we are the American church, and that's the problem. Because America, we don't value history, we don't value wisdom. Yeah, we don't value nuance
unless it's our own American history.
Well, even then we don't.
American.
Because America. But here's the problem: we don't even read that. Like we don't even. How many people actually know American history?
Oh my goodness! I just saw a video recently where what's her name? Caitlin Bennett or whatever the heck her name is. She was interviewing people. She was saying,
man on the street stuff.
Yeah, who's the president right now? And one person's like, the president right now. I don't know. Trump?
Well, okay, hold on. If it was done in the last 2 months, well,
it was like a week ago. It was like a month after Biden got elected.
That's what I'm saying. It's like you could legitimately say we don't really know who the president is. We know the meat puppet that's signing the papers.
But it wasn't because it wasn't because they believed in voter fraud. It's because they literally. Okay. I don't know if they drew a blank or what. Yeah.
No, I get it. Well, my Mark Davis, who's a radio host here in Dallas, in the morning, he calls it the Harris Biden administration.
No, but that's funny.
So hold on, just real quick. I know this is about as radically off topic as it's going to get. I'm just going to say this. I don't think Biden, Harris, neither of them. In fact, I think the reason they chose Harris is because she would follow orders. She's pure opportunist. I think this is whoever is pulling the strings on Biden, and that may be very, very literal because I don't think he's conscious. Whoever's pulling Biden strings, that's who's president. That not him. He's a figurehead. He's a meat puppet. Anyway, irrelevant though. So Gene, we're going to pray for you and your niece. We are very sorry to hear that. We'll pray for, when we're done with this episode. We're going to pray for you and your niece. And certainly don't apologize for not being here tomorrow for that. I mean, this is YouTube. It's recorded. This is why it's recorded. That's why I love it. You never miss a show. You may miss it live, but you get the joy of it anyway. But I'm very, very, very sorry to hear. I know you've mentioned this before about your niece, and it's very sad. We will definitely give her. We'll definitely pray for her and you once we're done here. But let's mention Tobit. You made a video very recently about the Book of Tobit, right?
Not
or an argument about the Book of Tobit.
Yeah, I wrote an article. I mean, I kind of made a video too because I threw together this goofy Tobit rap, messing around with the rapping. But yeah, looking into the Greek Septuagint caused me to look into the extra books that it contains. We call them the apocryphal books. We call them the books that the Catholic Church added to the Bible in the 1500s.
Which they didn't.
They didn't add anything in the 1500s. The early church had it in those books in their Bibles in the 300s, and nobody knows that. The only thing everybody knows is that Catholics added it in the 1500s, and they repeat it over and over again. It's not even true. These books were authored by Jews in the centuries before Christ. And one of those books is Tobit. It's a really cool story, but that's in the Greek Septuagint. It was in Hebrew originally. They found it in Hebrew in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's so funny. They always argue, well, the apocryphal books don't belong in the Bible because none of them are in the original Old Testament languages of Hebrew and Aramaic. The Old Testament is mostly Hebrew and parts of Daniel and Aramaic, and the apocryphal books don't show up in either of those, Hebrew or Aramaic. And then the Dead Sea Scrolls discovery is made, and they find Tobit in Hebrew and Aramaic. 5 copies, 4 in Aramaic and 1 in Hebrew. And so, and then also they say the apocryphal books, well, they're not the word of God because they took place during the silent years in between the time of Ezra and the time of Jesus. Well, no, Tobit didn't take place in that time. Tobit takes place after the Assyrian captivity and before the Babylonian captivity. And anyway, it's real history. But I shared an art. One of the things that people argue about the Book of Tobit, it depends on if you guys have read this book. You got to read it. But one of the arguments that people make against the Book of Tobit is they say in the story, they took the guts of a fish. Basically, Tobit has a son named Tobias, and this angel tells Tobias that his father, who's blind, Tobit is blind, and his son Tobias is told by an angel to take the guts of a fish and smear it on his father's eyes, and it will heal him of blindness. And this is one of the things that people say, well, obviously this isn't the word of God. You can't take fish guts and smear it on a blind person's eyes, and it healed them of blindness. It doesn't work that way, Unless
and he removes what they call cataracts.
Yeah.
Like the scales on Paul's eyes, these things fall off.
Yeah.
In his hands. But it wasn't the gall specifically that he talks about is what's for the eyes.
The gallbladder. Well, here's the thing is if it said that it was a supernatural miracle, we could believe anything. Jesus, used mud and smeared it in a guy's eyes, and that was a supernatural miracle. But you see, the Book of Tobit apparently is claiming that this was medicine, that it was a medicinal, natural thing. Mm-hmm. And I had made this Tobit rap where I'm basically arguing that God can do anything supernaturally, right? He did all kinds of supernatural things. So if he wants to use the guts of a fish to heal a man of blindness, no big deal. He can do whatever he wants. And people were arguing and saying, somebody had taken my Tobit rap video and uploaded it onto their channel and arguing that no, the Book of Tobit does not say it's supernatural. It's natural. It says it's medicine. Okay, so it doesn't say it's a supernatural miracle. It says it's for medicinal purposes. Mm-hmm. And so that's why they were arguing against this rap video that I had made. And so I started to look into it. Like, okay, they got a good point here. I mean, it says it was medicinal. It says it's medicine. So I thought, well, why don't I look into this? Why don't I, do they use anything to heal people of cataracts? Because Tobit wasn't actually blind. I mean, he was, but the blindness was caused by cataracts. Cataracts is where you've got this white film on your eye that's basically his eyes, it's not that his eyes didn't work, they were blocked by the cataracts, okay? And this is the leading cause of blindness in the world today, that people's eyes are blocked by like this white film in front of their eye. And that's what Tobit had. And so anyway, in the book of Tobit, he says, take the gallbladder of this fish and smear it on your father's eyes and you can peel the cataracts off. And so I thought, well, is there anything in modern medicine that resembles this at all? And so I just kind of Google it, look it up, you know, and I find out that there is this thing called Lanomax, and it's not being used on humans yet. They're only using it on dogs because, you know, they test it out on animals before they go over to humans. And so they're currently...
Plus dogs they actually use medicine. The same medicines we take is what they take.
Yeah. I mean, we're both mammals, right? And so basically, so they've been testing this out on dogs. They're currently seeking FDA approval for human trials. They want to see if this could benefit people, but they're just trying it on dogs for now. And so it's currently marketed just for dogs and rabbits and, you know, pets or whatever. But they might use it on people someday. You know, it's still kind of experimental medicine. But anyway, they have this thing called Lanomax that literally, I mean, they have before and after pictures. Before, and there's this white film on the dog's eye, and then after, and it's all cleared up, you know? And all these before and after pictures, and they're really marketing it like this is the only thing that works right now. This is legit. And so I thought, okay, well, you know, the book of Tobit says they smeared fish guts on Tobit's eyes and pulled the cataracts off. Could it be that this medicine, Lanomax, is made out of fish guts? I don't know. So I figured I'd look into it. And I found that the main active ingredient is something called lanosterol. So I started looking into what that is. And there's a number of videos out there on YouTube of medical professionals saying that lanosterol might be the thing that could heal of cataracts. You know, right now, the only option is surgery, where they literally remove the front.
Yeah, they literally remove it. Yeah.
They take it out. They take it out, and then they put like an artificial one on. It's like, oh my gosh, terrible. Yeah. But they're thinking, you know, this might be a cheaper alternative, you know, where you just put this eye drop in. And so lanosterol is the main active chemical in there. And so I thought, okay, so where does lanosterol come from? What does that come from? Fish guts, like Tobit says? I don't know.
Yeah. And
so I look into it, and I can't figure it out, but I asked a question on Yahoo Answers, and somebody told me that there's this thing called squalene that lanosterol comes from. So I started looking up on Wikipedia, what is squalene? And they say, yeah, squalene is this organic compound, and lanosterol can be derived from that. They could also create it in the lab because, you know, technology, they can create things now.
Right.
But originally they were getting it from squalene. So I'm like, okay, where does squalene come from? Well, squalene comes from shark liver oil. And so they even sell it in stores. They got, you know, bottles that say this is squalene, shark liver, you know, kind of like you go to the health food store, they got cod liver oil, you know, it's good. Omega-3 fatty acids, right? Yep. And so I was thinking about that, and I was like, okay, so squalene comes from shark liver oil. Last time I checked, a shark is a fish, and the liver comes from the guts. Yep. So they're literally using fish guts to clear what? Wow. So they're using fish guts, the liver of a shark, to make squalene. And from squalene, they're making this chemical, lanosterol, which they're using to make Lanomax, which they put on people's eyes, and it clears away their cataracts. So people are mocking the book of Tobit and saying the book of Tobit is a bunch of nonsense. It doesn't belong in the Bible. And one of the things they point to is this book is so ridiculous. It says that they use fish guts to heal people of blindness. Yeah, right. What a joke, man. And then I look into it. I'm just Googling it. I don't know anything. And I look into it and I find, yeah, they're literally using fish guts to clear away people's cataracts. Like they're literally doing this. Modern medicine.
Yeah, modern medicine. Well, so, and this is a great time to talk about what we were talking about before we went live, which is if the book itself was actually saying that the fish guts raw was the medicine that fixed his eyes, then maybe they would have a point. Because I mean, I don't think you can just take find some shark and grab its liver and then just rub it on some dude's eyes, and boom, he's fine. Because
Mm-hmm.
it talks about the cataracts falling out of his eyes.
Yeah.
Then that would definitely be a thing. But I think this is sort of where we came in. So the context of the Book of Tobit is that Tobias does not know that it's an angel that's telling him to do this, right?
Yeah, he doesn't know that. Yeah, he thinks he's just brother Azariah. And by the way, that ties into Hebrews 13 too.
Yep.
And this is something I'd always wondered about. Why does Hebrews 13:2 say that some have entertained angels unaware? Who? And people always point to Abraham and Lot. And they say, well, didn't they entertain angels unaware? Okay. When Abraham saw the angels coming, you know what he did?
Yeah.
He ran towards them, fell down on his face, and said, Lord, who does that to random strangers that show up? And then
he knew who they were.
He knew they were angels. And then when Lot was in Sodom and those two angels come to visit Sodom, right? He goes up to them and he bows down to them. Who does that for random strangers? And then when they were being threatened by these perverts of the city, he offers his two virgin daughters to be violated by these townsmen in order to protect these two. Who does that for random strangers?
So okay, now to that point, there's actually 2 points, but I come back, but I agree with you fundamentally, which is because that like back in the day, hospitality, hospitality is the main thing. But like I said, I agree with you. I think he knew that they were angels, and here's why. I think the townspeople knew that they were angels. That's why they wanted to sleep with them. I think they wanted to recreate the Nephilim. I think they knew these were divine beings.
But the thing is, though, is Abraham knew they were angels. Lot knew they were angels. And so when Hebrews 13:2 says some have entertained angels unaware without realizing it, what is that talking about? And after looking into the Greek Septuagint, because of these questions atheists were asking me, I find, oh my goodness, it looks like the Greek Septuagint is more consistent with the original Hebrew. And then because the Greek Septuagint includes these extra books in the Catholic Bible, I start reading those, and I read the Book of Tobit, and I'm like, first I'm surprised that it's actually about Jewish history. It's not about Catholic Church fathers. It's about a Jewish person, or rather an Israelite. And I can't come to find out in the story of Tobit, all throughout the whole story, they're entertaining an angel, not realizing that he's an angel. They're giving him a place to stay. They're giving him, letting him sit down and eat with them. They're entertaining an angel unaware. This is the only thing that fits with that. And so when Hebrews 13:2 says that some have entertained angels unaware, what's the first thing that's going to come to people's mind? The Book of Tobit. The Dead Sea Scrolls prove that they had multiple copies of the Book of Tobit in Hebrew and Aramaic. The community at Qumran were Jews that lived before the time of Christ. Certainly, this is the thing that's going to come to their minds when they read the book of Hebrews, because the letter of Hebrews is addressed to the Hebrews, to Hebrew-speaking Jewish believers. And it was written in Hebrew originally.
And this goes back to the idea of the fundamental argument you were making was, sure, Tobit seems strange to us because we're like, you can't just rub fish guts in someone's eyes and fix cataracts, and then cataracts aren't just going to fall out and he's fine. Like, that's not how it works. But that's the whole point, is that if you read the Book of Tobit the way it's intended to be read, which is a literary, which doesn't mean it wasn't true, but it was a literary text, you're supposed to understand the context of the angel hiding his identity from Tobias means that even the method of Tobit's healing is hidden, right? It's not the fish guts that heals Tobit. It's God who's ultimately healing Tobit.
Yeah. I don't know. It could be either one. It might have been a natural medicine, or maybe it was supernatural and he just used something natural.
Well, again, I go back to the cataracts. Then he wouldn't falling out. That's not a natural thing. But my whole point is, it's like it's the fact that you can extract this chemical from fish guts is the point, right? It's like that's a connection that shouldn't exist, and that's the kind of thing that we see in the Old Testament where God's telling people not to do A, B, C, D. With these health regulations, and everyone's like, well, why would God care about this? Well, he would care about it if you had a very advanced understanding of microbiology, epidemiology.
God knows why he put everything in there. Yeah.
Exactly. So he knows. So he's like, y'all aren't going to get this for like 3,000 years. But trust me, you don't want to do this stuff. And the thing is, it's like if you were trying to tell someone who was living a Bronze Age existence in the desert, it's like, well, what could we tell them to do that would keep them alive? And let's remember these, the kosher laws and the cleanliness laws kept the Jews safe from disease, even in the Middle Ages, right? This is one of the things that a lot of people used against the Jews, was that they died at a far smaller percentage from the Black Plague because they were clean. They kept these things going.
Yeah. And so the same thing is true with this whole coronavirus thing,
Yeah.
When you're eating healthy, you're going to be less susceptible to get, I haven't been sick since like February 2020. It's been more than a year. I'm not worried about this virus.
Exactly. That's a whole different conversation.
That's a whole different topic. Yeah.
Topic. Exactly. But for Tobit, again, let's go back to that. The problem is people are saying, well, that the word medicine means that it was the medicine, that rubbing the fish is what healed the guys. But if you actually read it, it's kind of clear that it's God who's healing him. It's just again, the angel has hidden his identity the entire time. That's
the revelation of the angel. That's actually a really good point. That's a really good point, because I mean, maybe it does have that medicinal value, but at the same time, God supernaturally made it all that much more potent than it would naturally be. You know what I mean? Because, when they're using, healing up cataracts in dogs, I mean, it's taken like 6 weeks, and Tobit had it done immediately. So there might have been a supernatural element there as well maybe it was supernatural. I don't know.
So I think it just makes sense from the text, because again, it isn't until after Tobit is healed that they find out that it was an angel. So I think, again, if you read it from the problem is it seems like when we look at the Bible, we take all those skills that we learned in literature and all this, and we remove. It's like we take all that and we remove it from our head and we put it over here. It's like, well, clearly none of those skills can help us here. And it's like, guys, that's the Bible was written with a poetic intent. There are understandings, there are themes. We have to understand that's a point, right? So it's like when you read it, it's like it's kind of clear the fact that that Tobit and Tobias don't know that the angel is an angel until after Tobit is healed. It puts all of that in you realize, okay, well, it's a different context. The angel is hiding the actions from Tobit and Tobias. So it is God healing him. It's just they've hidden the purpose, or they've hidden, and it's
kind of like just like
Shakespeare, right?
Yeah. So it's kind of like just like you have an angel disguised as a human. So in the same way, maybe it was a supernatural miracle disguised as a natural medicine. And also it was kind of the same way when the Israelites came out of Egypt and they came across this bitter waters, the bitter waters of Mara. And they couldn't drink it. And then what does Moses do? He takes a piece of wood and he tosses it into the water. And it made the bitter waters sweet. So is this a natural thing or a supernatural thing? It does not say it was supernatural. It probably was. It was probably a supernatural thing. I don't think it was naturally, well, this particular type of wood, it can make bitter waters all of a sudden. Really?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe. The whole thing I doubt it.
Well, but that's the whole point, right? A lot of these things are actions that God tells people to take sometimes, and we're all like, why is he telling him to do the actions? Because it's an expression of faith, right? Just say something about it. Someone tells you, okay, this water here, you can't drink it, but if you run over there and grab that branch, you throw it in there, it'll be sweet. You would look at me and be like, dude, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. It doesn't do this.
Oh, and also I think that in the book of, I think, 1st or 2nd Kings, I think that you could learn that if you take a twig of a tree and put it in water, it makes iron float. So that was a natural thing too, right? No, that was a supernatural thing, right? And so it might have been, might have been supernatural.
Yeah, I think the problem is it's the context that tells us that it's supernatural. And I think the problem is a lot of times the Bible sort of assumes that you're not an idiot. And so, and the problem is the problem is I think a lot of atheists And unfortunately, a lot of modern scholars tend to
Yeah.
fall into that category.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's like, guys, stop. Okay, I had to stop watching a lot of these shows, like the History Channel put out, when I started yelling at my television. And one of them was they had just done an entire episode basically talking about how there was evidence for the Jews coming out of Egypt and all this, and they talked about this, right? And then the very next episode was them talking about how the Jews were simply Canaanites that had a religious difference.
Oh, brother.
And I'm like,
good grief.
Are you like? I literally started screaming at the television. My wife was like, "Why are you yelling at the television? You know it can't hear you, right?"
Did you watch that on Disney Plus?
No,
because I watched something. Because you know how Disney Plus it has the National Geographic section.
Yeah, no, this was a Discovery Channel show.
Okay, because I totally watched something on Disney Plus that was in the National Geographic section. And it was about the Bible, and it was doing that kind of stuff. You know, it's not that's not biblical. And then also there's this thing called Exodus Decoded, and it's got James Cameron in it. You know, the guy that did Terminator and Titanic. Yeah, and it's a documentary, but he does a little bit of narration. And I actually like that one. I don't agree with all of it, though.
Well, that was the thing I was talking about earlier.
Oh, is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
That one, I disagree with a lot of what they say in that, because they're trying to take the supernatural and make it natural.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot in there that I didn't agree with, but there was stuff about it that I think was very, very good.
There's really good stuff in it, yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, like Avaris, which goes back, they talk about Avaris. They talk about the signet ring. Yeah. That's in that show. So like
I didn't know they talked about it in there.
Okay. Yeah, they actually show it. So here's the thing: there's a lot in that that's good. This is the problem. The problem is we can't just take something just because someone makes a show out of it doesn't mean it's real, right? We got to take it and say, okay, well, what stuff is real? What stuff isn't? Where are they kind of trying to hem and haw? When are they trying to do things? And there's stuff that's really important. I think in that video, I do think that maybe that golden thing that they show. Right, that's like they think that it's actually the tabernacle, or not the tabernacle, but it's the Holy of Holies from this perspective, right? That they had. I think they've got a legitimate argument for that. Guys, go watch the video. I'll find a link to it later and maybe have it for tomorrow.
Yeah, I bought the Exodus Decoded. I bought the Exodus Decoded on iTunes just because there were some things in it that I thought were really, really cool. But yeah, I don't agree with when they start taking the plagues and trying to explain them naturally.
Right? No, I agree with that. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm right there with you. I think these are supernatural things.
And they have to be supernatural, because if they're not, then it's pointless. Because the whole thing here is that God does a miracle, and then the magicians reproduce it, because these magicians are basically witches, sorcerers. They have some of that power, right? Because God gives some of his power to angels. And those angels become demons. And so Moses does, the snake thing with the staff, and then the magicians reproduce it. And then God does the frog thing.
Hold on. Actually, it was Aaron, and it was...
Yeah, it was Aaron's.
But hold on. It becomes a tanin. It does not become a nakash.
Oh, okay.
Moses' staff becomes a nakash, which is a serpent. The thing is, everyone's like, well, tanin is just sort of this broad idea of a water monster. So it's like, well, then everyone just says, well, it must have been a serpent, right? No, it in an Egyptian context, in the context of Egypt, a tanin, because again, it just means water monster writ large. But if you put it in certain specific instances, it becomes a very specific thing. In Egypt, it's a Nile crocodile.
Okay. So
yeah, just fun little thing there.
Yeah.
So it's Aaron who does it, and Aaron's staff becomes a tanin, which is a saltwater Nile crocodile.
Well, anyway, continue, so Moses and Aaron, they do one thing, and then the magicians reproduce it, and then Moses and Aaron do another thing with what the water turning to blood, and then the magicians reproduce it.
Yeah, they reproduce everything. Yeah,
and then they do the frog thing, and then the magicians reproduce it. But then the next one, God does a miracle, I think, with the gnats. And then the magicians can't reproduce that. And then God does another one, and they can't reproduce that. And he does another one, and another one, and another one, and they can't reproduce any of these. And so God keeps stepping it up a notch, all the way up to level 10. And basically the magicians lost on like level 2, or level 2 or 3 or whatever. And so it just goes to show God's power is so much more powerful than anything the devil or these demons or magicians or witchcrafts and warlocks can do. They have a certain level of power, but God is so, so far above that. And so for someone to say that these plagues were just natural totally undermines the point.
Mm-hmm.
The point is God has way, way, way more power than these witches and warlocks or magicians or whatever they are. And so, yeah, when people just say, well, it just naturally occurred. Well, then that means it would have happened anyway, even if God wasn't there, or even if Moses wasn't there, you know?
Yeah.
And so,
exactly.
Yeah, I don't like it when people do all that kind of explaining things away natural. But if it does say it was natural, then, I mean, it makes sense to believe that.
Yeah.
The question is, though, is, you know, was it just saying that it was a medicine, just like Raphael, the angel, was just saying that he's Azariah when he's actually an angel?
Yeah.
Maybe he was doing the same thing with the medicine, just saying he's just saying that it's a medicine when it's actually something miraculous. I don't know. But anyway, I typed up this PDF about how they're actually literally making cataract medicine from the guts of a fish. And by the way, these scientists today are doing it from the liver of sharks, whereas the Bible says the gallbladder. And I learned from someone else that the gallbladder is actually attached to the liver, and it actually contains fluids that the liver created. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is so connected. Like, it's almost exactly the same. And people use this as a way of saying the Book of Tobit is a bunch of nonsense. And of course they discredit all these apocryphal books, and that's one of the things they use to discredit the Greek Septuagint. They don't take the Greek Septuagint seriously because it contains these books, and so it's a stumbling block for people, understanding the correct timeline. And so it's not like I was ever really interested in the Apocrypha to begin with. I have no interest in anything Catholic. I'm not Catholic. I never have been. I have no intentions of becoming Catholic. So I had no interest in these apocryphal books. It was when I started looking into the Greek Septuagint that I realized this is a Greek translation that was used by Greek-speaking Jews before the time of Christ. Catholics didn't write those books. They had to be Jewish. So that's when I started reading them. And actually, before I started reading Tobit and Judith and stuff, before I started reading them, I was expecting to find, stuff that was written by Catholics about Catholic Church Fathers. I was expecting that. And I look into it, I'm like, this is about a Jew. And they lived during the Assyrian captivity back in like centuries before Christ. This isn't Catholic. This is Jewish history. This is not. And so when I talk about these books, they're like, well, why are you promoting those? What are you, Catholic or something? And I'm like, they're not Catholic books. These are Jewish books.
And the thing is, Paul references them in many of his writings. Like they're I mean, and you do a lot of this in your videos, which is why I recommend people go watch them. You show like there's a lot of references from Paul and Jesus quotes from Esdras. Like the simple fact of the matter is they were there, they were useful. Again, one of the things we're talking about in our conversation about the Nephilim is how often the Book of Enoch is referenced or utilized. Like even if it's not a direct quote, it's still being referenced.
Yeah.
And like Tobit, again, like I said, angels unaware. When it talks about men,
being tortured.
That comes from Maccabees.
And I've always wondered about that. Like, who are these men being tortured? I can't think of anybody in the Old Testament that was tortured. And it's like when it says that there were those who by faith quenched the flames of fire. Who's that talking about? Yeah, obviously, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Yeah. And then when it says that there were those who by faith shut the mouths of lions, who's that talking about? Who in the Old Testament was thrown into a lion's den? Daniel. It doesn't mention Daniel by name, but that's obviously what it's talking about. Yeah. It says there were those.
You don't have to. Yeah. It's like, again, if I'm like, it's like if we're in a conversation about comic book heroes, and I'm like, the rich, billionaire with a metal suit, who I'm talking about. Right. It's the same thing. Paul, they're making references to stories everyone knows. So it's like, well, then who are these men who were tortured? Yeah. And then also it says that women received their dead raised to life again. Yeah. Who in the Old Testament was a woman who received her dead raised to life again? You're going to find that in 1 Kings with the story of Elijah.
Elijah raised
one
a boy
woman.
from the dead and presented him to his mother. And then 2 Kings, Elisha raised a boy from the dead, presented him to his mother. There's nothing else in the whole entire Old Testament. There's nothing else like this. Obviously, that's who it's talking. It doesn't mention Elijah. It doesn't mention Elisha. Doesn't mention the women by name. But we know who it's talking about. But when it says that there were those who were tortured, not accepting deliverance so they might obtain a better resurrection, I tell you what, I've read through the Bible multiple times. I've read through the New Testament multiple times. And every time I come to that, I'm just like, huh? Who are these people? I can't think of anybody who was tortured in the Old Testament. Who are these people being tortured? Why are they being tortured? Who's torturing them? Why were they given a chance to be delivered? Why would they reject their chance to be delivered? And what is this about a better resurrection? What on earth is this talking about? I could never figure it out. And it wasn't until I started researching the Apocrypha that I found out that the New Testament has references in the New Testament in old King James, the old King James Bible or the old Geneva Bible that the Pilgrims used, these older translations, they had marginal notes that referenced the Apocryphal books in the New Testament. Yeah. And when it says in the King James, the old original 1611 King James, I have a photocopy replica of this. Back in 2011, it was the 400-year anniversary of the King James, and they had these. Cool. They had these at Walmart. It was like, I don't know, 10 or $11. It said on the front of it, this is an exact photocopy replica of the original 1611 King James. And so I got one. And anyway, in Hebrews 11:35, when it says others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, next to the word tortured, there is a marginal note. And when you look it up in the margin, it says 2 Mac 7:7. Now, what is that talking about? What is 2 Mac? Well, it's not talking about a MacBook Pro. It's not talking about macaroni and cheese. And it's not talking about Toby Mac, as cool as that would be. It's talking about 2nd Maccabees. Yeah. The original King James Bible, a lot of people don't know this, included not just the Old and New Testaments, it included the apocryphal section in between. And in that section, it includes the book of 2nd Maccabees. And when you look up 2nd Maccabees, chapter 7, it tells the story. And this is real history, by the way. Okay, even secular historians, even atheists know this is real history. Okay, so don't even start telling me this is fictional history. Even atheists acknowledge it's real history. Okay. So anyway, in 2nd Maccabees chapter 7, basically the guy whose name is Antiochus Epiphanes, he's basically the big bad guy. He's the villain. He's basically he is to Hanukkah what Darth Vader is to Star Wars. Okay, he's the big villain, and he's the king of one of the Greek empires. The Greek Empire was divided up into 4 sections, and the Seleucid Empire was one of those sections. He was the king of that section, and he was trying to force the Jews to lose their religion. He made it illegal to observe the Sabbath. He made it illegal to read the scriptures. He told people not to circumcise their children. And so if a woman was found to have circumcised her son, they would throw her and the baby off a cliff. Just evil, evil things. And so one of the things that they would do is try to force them to not observe the dietary laws. So King Antiochus brings this woman and her 7 sons forward and tells them to eat pork, which comes from a pig, which the Old Testament law says you're not supposed to eat. Even to this day, pork is considered to be not kosher. So Jewish people today don't eat pork. It's not a kosher food. Right. And so anyway,
it's a shame because let's face it, burgers with bacon. That's bacon. The thing right there.
Oh, bacon.
Yeah.
And so
that's a true sacrifice, giving up bacon.
It might have been bacon that he was tempting them with. I don't know. It probably wasn't. Yeah. It was pork. And so he said to them, just eat this pork and I won't torture you, but if you don't eat it, then you're going to get tortured. And that's basically, I mean, he didn't say it exactly like that, but that's basically what he's saying. And so each one of these 7 brothers wants to obey God's law, and so they refuse to eat this pork. And so each and every one of them gets tortured. And if you read the chapter, 2nd Maccabees chapter 7, each and every one of those brothers said something about how God, the king of the universe, is going to raise us up someday. Or this one of the brothers, he was having his hands chopped off by them. And he said, you're depriving us of these now, but God is going to give them back to us. Every one of those brothers said something about resurrection, new life. God's going to, and so in Hebrews 11:35, it says, okay, 4 things. 1, they were tortured. Camera here. 1, they were tortured. 2, they were given a chance to be delivered. 3, they refused to be delivered. And 4, they specifically said they had a hope for a better resurrection. And what do we find in 2 Maccabees chapter 7? 1, they were tortured. They had their eyes gouged out, tongues cut out. They were boiled in hot oil and hot water, stretched on a wheel, arms and feet getting chopped off. It was horrible. And so 1, they were tortured. 2, they were given a chance to be delivered by eating pork. Okay. 3, they refused to be delivered because they didn't want to disobey God's law. And then 4, they specifically said they had a hope for a better resurrection. It fits on all 4 points. Yep. And when I had read Hebrews 11, and of course, growing up, I'm just like, oh yeah, those stupid Catholics, they have those extra books in their Bible. I don't, I'm not going to read that garbage. And then after I find out what these actually are, what these books actually contain, it's Jewish history, not Catholic history. And I find out that this thing that I had always wondered about in Hebrews 11, who were these men being tortured? And I find out that on all 4 points, it matches exactly with 2 Maccabees chapter 7. And yet people will say today, the New Testament never references the apocryphal books. That's how we know they don't belong in the Bible. Well, if you've never read 2 Maccabees, you're not going to know what Hebrews 11:35 is talking about. You're not going to know who those tortured men are. And so you're going to believe them when they say it's not quoted in the New Testament or not referenced in the New Testament.
Yeah.
And so they're taking advantage of your ignorance. They're taking advantage of the fact that you don't know. And so you're just going to believe them when they say that.
Or the fact that Jesus quotes, it's second Esdras, right? Or fourth
Second Esdras, yeah. He appears to quote it, yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing with the book of Enoch. It's like Enoch is quoted directly once.
Yeah, in Jude.
But I have found 11 different references to the book of Enoch.
I don't doubt it.
And it's like it's all over. And more importantly, Pauline theology makes way more sense if you throw in the book of Enoch, if you throw in the Apocrypha. When you realize what he is saying, it makes way more sense to have these books in there. Now,
do you like how I like right in between the 2 Red Sea posts?
I do. Yeah. I just love the fact that it's the deer parting them.
As the deer panteth for the water.
For the water, yes. And the wall's blue, so this is.
And I did not kill that deer, by the way. I didn't kill that. Okay, that thing was killed when I was like 1 year old, so it wasn't me. I didn't do it.
Okay.
No deer were harmed in the making of this video.
Well, that's fine because I don't think anyone here would. In fact, you're saying you lost credibility on that one because we're all cool with that.
Well, I'm not saying I wouldn't.
There you go.
I've never gone deer hunting.
Now you're back. You're flip flopping. Okay, so there was a question earlier on I want to address, and you're the right person to address this with. He talks about there was a question about does the compression of history go all the way back to Adam? My compression of history was simply talking about how we view things. Like we talk about the revolution, and we often don't realize it's 20 years of time. We talk about the Jews of the first century, the Jewish rabbis making alterations to some of these dates. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a 50-year period. Like it's not a
and that's one of the things that Justin Martyr says. Yeah. Is he says Justin Martyr, he's a church father. He lives in the 2nd century, and he got into an argument with a man named Trypho. Trypho was a Jew, and he was arguing with them. And Justin Martyr was saying that the Jewish people had taken things out of the Bible. And Trypho, says, give me some examples. Like, what are you talking about? What did we take out of our Bibles? And one of the things that Justin Martyr says is he says, we know for a fact that this particular thing was taken out of the Hebrew. You know why? Because there's some synagogues that still have that in their Hebrew copies because it was only recently taken out. Right. And he's basically saying there was a progression over the years. Things are being taken out because over the years, the Jews are getting into arguments with Christians. And what's their solution? Yeah. Take out the thing that is in the Hebrew that points to Christ so that they won't get into that argument anymore.
Exactly.
this prophecy points to Jesus, and the Jew can say, well, actually, the Hebrew doesn't say that. The actual Hebrew word means this. So when it says the virgin shall be with child, the Hebrew word doesn't mean virgin. It means the young woman. It just means the young woman. It's not talking about a virgin, And so if they just change the Hebrew text, then they can disprove these arguments that the Christians are giving. And so Justin Martyr argues, this isn't my argument. This is what Justin Martyr was arguing in the 2nd century. He died for the gospel. He gave up his life.
Yeah.
And this is what he was arguing. He was saying the Jews changed things, and we know they changed things because we've been to these Jewish synagogues, and their Hebrew copies contain it. But then another Jewish synagogue, has something different in their Hebrew because they're in the process of getting things changed.
Exactly. But
it's so deceptive.
Oh, it is. But this is how humans do things. Again, guys, fake news is not a new thing, guys. It just isn't. But the other concept, I think, when he talks about going back to Adam about compression, is I think he's asked. I think I just want to address that part of it first. But I think what he's really asking is, did they only change the post-flood patriarchs to Abraham, or were there alterations made to the patriarchs before the flood?
See, I don't know about that, because when you go to the ages before the flood, the Greek Septuagint does have extra 100 years on a number of generations before the flood that the Hebrew is missing. Oh, really? Yes, but the thing is, though, is that the Samaritan Pentateuch is one of those things that actually agrees with the Hebrew before the flood. And then also there was Josephus. And according to the book of Josephus that I have, there's this chart in the back of the Bible that insinuates that the numbers of Josephus have been corrupted. And they say that his original genuine numbers actually agree with the Hebrew Masoretic on the years before the flood. He agrees with the Greek Septuagint after the flood. Even his original genuine numbers agree with the Greek Septuagint after the flood. But before the flood, only his present day corrupted numbers agree with the Septuagint before the flood, but his original genuine numbers agree with the Hebrew Masoretic. So does the Samaritan Bible. And so when you look at the years before the flood, if you follow that principle of 2 or 3 witnesses that I talk about in the video, it actually appears that the Hebrew Masoretic text is correct about the years before the flood. And so, but which then would make
sense, because Christians don't point to that as evidence for.
But also after the flood, you have that problem where Shem is outliving his great grandson. Before the flood, you don't have that. If you follow the Hebrew or the Greek, it doesn't matter. Each generation dies one after the other. You don't have the problem, And so, before the flood, it could be that the Hebrew Masoretic gets it right about the years before the flood. And that might be why the Samaritan Bible agrees with the Hebrew Masoretic before the flood. So with the Samaritan Pentateuch, in the years before the flood, in Genesis 5, the Samaritan Bible agrees with the Hebrew Masoretic. But in the years after the flood, in Genesis 11, the Samaritan Pentateuch agrees with the Greek Septuagint. And the same thing appears to be with Josephus's original genuine numbers. And so that's why I think that maybe in the years before the flood, the Hebrew actually is right, and it's just the years after the flood. But then again, you got early church fathers like Eusebius, who actually agrees with both. He just follows the Greek Septuagint. But so I don't know. I mean, I'm open to either one. But when it comes to the years after the flood in Genesis 11, I'm completely convinced that those years belong in there, that the Greek Septuagint gets it right. Because come on, Shem outlived his great. Come on, that's stupid. Yeah. And so I'm completely convinced when it comes to the years after the flood. Before the flood, I don't know. I don't really have any way of proving it. I mean, I can follow the principle of 2 or 3 witnesses and say that the Masoretic gets it right. But I'm open to the Greek being right as well. I don't know.
No, I get it. No, which is you see, this is why I love this channel, and this is the idea I wanted to set forth with this whole idea, which is sometimes we're not gonna know. Like, all we can do is say, look, here's what the evidence has. This is my reading, and this is why. Yeah. Like you said, you're like, hey, with the numbers after the flood, we have 2 or 3 witnesses showing that these are the correct numbers.
That's the thing, the 2 or 3 witnesses. It's like, well, why? How do you get? Because think about it. If the Greek Septuagint had added those extra 100 years onto 6 generations, when it should not have, if it just added them on there and it shouldn't have done that, how did they end up in the Samaritan Pentateuch? Was the Samaritan Pentateuch?
Josephus. Why would Josephus use them? But because Josephus even had access to the texts from the temple,
he had them
because
from
of the
temple,
Romans. But like he had access to the original texts.
How would you explain that they originated with the Greek Septuagint making that error and then ended up in the Samaritan Pentateuch? How would you explain that? Would you say the Samaritan Pentateuch was translated from the Greek Septuagint? That doesn't make sense. The Samaritan Pentateuch is in Hebrew. Who translates from Greek into Hebrew? What? That's backwards. The Samaritan Pentateuch predates the Greek Septuagint, so you can't say that. It doesn't make sense. So what if it's the other way around? What if those extra 100 years on 6 generations originated with the Samaritan Pentateuch? Maybe that's where it started. And then the Greek Septuagint was translated from the Samaritan Pentateuch. Does that make sense? No. I'll tell you why. The Greek Septuagint was translated by Jews. It was used by Jews. The Jews hate the Samaritans. They're not going to translate from the Bible of the people they hated. The Samaritan Pentateuch, the Samaritans had changed the mountain you're supposed to worship on. This is something that a woman wanted to argue with Jesus about.
Yeah.
The woman at the well is like, well, you Jews say to worship on Mount Zion, but we worship on Mount Gerizim. What do you say? Well, see, this is what the Samaritans did. In the first 5 books of Moses, when it says to worship on Mount Zion, okay, the Samaritans changed that. They changed it to Mount Gerizim because remember when Israel split, you got Jeroboam and Rehoboam. When the northern kingdom of Israel split, what did they do? They started offering sacrifices to 2 golden calves on top of Mount Gerizim, and they didn't go down to they didn't go up to Mount Zion anymore. And so the Samaritans had changed their text to say Mount Gerizim rather than Mount Zion. Well, what does the Greek Septuagint say? It correctly says Mount Zion. How could you say the Greek Septuagint was translated from the Samaritan Pentateuch if it correctly says Mount Zion? Yeah. And the Jews aren't going to, the Greek Septuagint was made for the Jews by the Jews. They're not going to translate from the Samaritans. So think about this. You can't say that the Greek was translated from the Samaritan. You can't say the Samaritan was translated from the Greek. Neither of those make sense. And it doesn't make sense to say they both independently of one another
made the same mistake.
Added this extra 100 years on 6. Oh yeah, we just both independently made the exact same mistake accidentally. What? Okay, that doesn't make sense.
And that still doesn't answer why Josephus who, again, after the Romans destroyed the temple, they had those texts. He had access to them.
They gave it to him because they told him, make a history for us.
Exactly.
And so you've got 3 witnesses independently of one another, pointing to an older Hebrew text. It's the only thing that makes any logical sense. There had to have been an older Hebrew text that included those extra 100 years on 6 generations. And that's how they ended up in Josephus and the Greek Septuagint and the Samaritan Pentateuch, because they all originated from that original Hebrew. And then at a later point in time, then the modern, newer Hebrew text had them taken out at some point in time. That's the only thing that makes any logical sense. And there's so many people, they don't want to listen. They don't want to listen to that. They're like, oh, I trust the Hebrew. King James, King James, King James. Don't question the King James.
Well, but then they question the King James when it comes to the Apocrypha. They will, it's like we're King James only. Why? Like, but you're King James only, and until it becomes the Apocrypha, then forget the King James because the Catholics threw it.
Their argument is that the Bible promises that God is going to preserve His words for all generations, and the King James is what we use, so He must have preserved His word for us. Okay, well, the early church used the Greek Septuagint for the first 400 years of Christianity. Did He not preserve His words to the early church? Wouldn't it make more sense that the very first Christians had the preserved word of God?
Yeah.
And that at a later point in time, the Catholic Church departs from the preserved word of God and uses something different. And then the Catholic Church has a baby called the Protestant Church. And it's basically a chip off the old block. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. Okay. So the Catholic Church, it was using a wrong text. And so, for someone to make the argument, well, God promised He would preserve His words, so that must mean our Bible is correct. Can you imagine? What if a Jehovah's Witness made that argument? Oh, well, we Jehovah's Witnesses, we have our New World Translation, which has all kinds of changes to it, to match up with Jehovah's Witness doctrine. Well, this is the Bible we use, and God promised He'd preserve His word to us. Really? Or the Mormons. Imagine the Mormons saying that we have this Book of Mormon, and it has all this fiction in it, and all this nonsense that Joseph Smith made up out of his imagination, by the way. And they're like, well, it has to be the word of God because God promised He would preserve His words to us. What are you talking about? If God promised that He would preserve His words to all generations, he has to first preserve his word with the early church. The only way God's word can be handed down to us is if it was first handed down to the early church. It's the only way it's possible. So the early church had to have the right version to start with, right? Mm-hmm. And if we later on diverted and did something different from what the early church did, that doesn't mean God didn't preserve his word. That means we were unfaithful to his word by departing from it. That's our fault, not his. Don't blame him for our mistake.
Yeah, and the Septuagint's still around. It's like those texts are still around.
Here. The Orthodox are still using it.
Yeah. So okay, Gene, I'm going to come to that question in just a second. Unfortunately, at this point, I need to go get my daughter taught how to drive here. But let me answer 2 quick questions, and we'll pray and we'll get out of here. As far as the Lion Men of Moab, that was that question earlier. So here's the thing: I have done research. I can't find any evidence that there was ever like a title Lion Man, like that was the title. So the term Lion Men does appear to be a descriptor rather than like some sort of honorific title. So the implication is that they looked like something more than human. What does that mean? Does that mean they were like Kilrathi running around with lion heads? I don't think so. But I do think that maybe it meant that they were not human, like not fully human. I think they were some form of probably Nephilim. Again, I'm open to the idea that it was an honorific title, but I can't find evidence for that being the case. So I think, now, does that mean that, again, I don't think they would look like cats. I think that they're just saying they may have been, maybe more hair, maybe additional fur. Maybe they looked more animalistic than a person, right? Normally does. So that seems to be the indication. But we don't really know. As far as what is the best Bible, again, we've sort of had this conversation in earlier episodes. We're not saying that the King James isn't a good translation. What we're pointing out is that there is a problem with again, because it's not just the King James, it's a bunch of different ones that uses the Masoretic text for its Old Testament, right? And this is complicated. In fact, you know what? I'll have Dr. Bob on in a couple of weeks to talk about how this is done more often than not. So when with biblical translation, they try to have a couple different versions of these older texts to work against, right? That's how this works. It's not a one and done kind of a thing. But what happens is the King James, the Vulgate, which is the Latin version used by the Catholic Church, and most modern translations use what's called the Masoretic text for the Old Testament. Yeah. And so it appears that the Hebrew Masoretic text has had some alterations made.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been discussing. Now, It isn't sufficient to change modern church theology or anything like that. It's these little, the changes are minor, but they can affect these very niche conversations, right? And it alters certain understandings, not of any eternal value, but it does affect this sort of conversation. Again, you have that extra 650 years. You've got plenty of time for there to be the workforce for Babel, for the pyramids to get built, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that the King James is a bad translation. Rather, they based their translation off of a text that was itself corrupted. So that's why, like the ESV actually does use a lot more of this modern scholarship with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they use the Septuagint, and they fixed a lot of this, but not all of it.
Yeah.
This is not, and the problem is, even with translations, again, I've said this before on the channel, and I will always say it, there is no such thing as translation. There's only interpretation. That's the real problem here. Because when you're translating one word in one language to a word in another language, you are having to find, you can only use the word that means something to you in this other language, right? That's sort of the problem here. Like Hebrew and English are radically different languages. Same thing with Greek. So all of these translations each one has a point of failure and a point of accuracy, or something they do well, right? A great example of this would be let's use the Septuagint since we're sticking there, right? I think the fact that it uses giants for Nephilim and demons, and because that's where we get the word demons from the Greek Septuagint, for evil spirits, I think those are very, very when we understand their broader context in Greek culture, it makes way more sense as to why they did that, because they are a demon in the Greek context wasn't an evil spirit per se. It was the spirit of what they call these golden humans that lived during the golden age. They were bringers of knowledge, and which is why if you read the Greeks, they speak very highly of demons. The Jewish rabbis picked it because they understood that a demon, or these evil spirits, are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. So they're trying to tell us something. That's why Peter uses the word Tartarus in his epistle, right? He says that the spirits, which are the watchers, trapped in Tartarus. Well, why does he use the word Tartarus? He had any number of words. Why Tartarus? Because Tartarus is the prison of the Titans. So Peter's telling us that the watchers are the Titans, right? He's making these connections in this language for us. It's the same thing. So again, I use a New King James. I just understand that it has points of failure and points where it doesn't do things well.
Yeah, I think
other translations do.
That's the best thing to understand is that, I still read the New King James and sometimes the NIV, and it's not about like what translation is the best. It's about the fact that you just have to understand that when it comes to the Old Testament, when you run into something that kind of doesn't make sense, just know that the answer to whatever contradiction you're looking at might be in the Greek Septuagint. That might be the thing that might solve it. That's all. It doesn't mean that, these are bad translations that we're using. It just means that they might be wrong about some things. I mean, one example would be in, I believe it's in 1 Samuel. It says that Saul had David play the harp for him, and David became his armor bearer and sent a message to his dad, Jesse, and said, hey, can your son stay with me and be my armor bearer and play the harp for me? And then the very next chapter, David kills Goliath, and Saul's like, who's that? Whose son is he? Go find out for me who his dad is. What do you mean go find out who his dad is? You just sent a letter to his dad asking him to stay with you to be his armor bearer. What are we talking about? It seems like a contradiction. Well, if you read it in the Greek Septuagint, there's parts of that chapter that are actually missing. I think it's in chapter 17 of 1 Samuel. In the Greek Septuagint, there's parts that are missing. Well, guess what's missing? The part where Paul is asking, whose son is he? The very thing that is contradictory is the very thing that's missing from the Greek Septuagint. And people will complain about the Greek Septuagint and say, oh, you can't trust that Greek Septuagint. There's a whole section of the David and Goliath chapter that's missing. That's terrible. Yeah, the section that's missing is the section that's contradictory. And so whenever you come across something in the Old Testament and you're like, I don't understand that, look it up in the Greek Septuagint. That might, it's just a helpful tool. Honestly, it would be better if our Old Testaments followed the Septuagint more because the early church used it. But that doesn't mean you can't use the New King James and say, oh, you're not going to understand the Bible now. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, and here's the other thing, right? Again, one of the things we mentioned earlier is we have people who are today, they are King James only, but they're only King James only.
Yeah.
When it suits them, because when you bring up the fact that the original King James included the Apocrypha, as you have, then all of a sudden they're like, well, not that part. That's the stuff the Catholics are in.
Yeah.
Well, then tell me which one it is. Either it's the King James or it's not. The modern King James, and again, only the modern King James in the West removes the Apocrypha.
Yeah. And you want to know something that's so
because
sickening
the Greek
about
Orthodox Church keeps it.
You want to know something that's so sickening about that? Remember when I was telling you the 400th anniversary of the King James about how I found that exact photocopy replica that it was at Walmart for like $11? Guess what was missing?
Would it be the Apocrypha?
Yeah. So they say in the beginning of it, this is an exact photocopy replica of the King James. And you know what they did? They photoshopped the table of contents. So if you look at the table of contents of the King James, on the top there's the Old Testament, then below that there's the Apocrypha, and then below that there's the New Testament. So the New Testament is on the bottom, and the Apocrypha is in the middle, and then the Old Testament is on top. They photoshopped the New Testament part, and they pulled it up to where the Apocrypha was. You would never even know that the Apocrypha was ever there. They photoshopped it. This is an exact photocopy replica, except for the part we photoshopped.
Yeah.
You got to be kidding me. But you can go to Amazon and you can find a real photocopy replica of the King James that doesn't have the books taken out.
Yeah.
Come on. And by the way, when they originally made the apocryphal section, that was in the 1500s when they made it. It was Martin Luther who started the idea of, hey, let's take these books out of the body of text and put them in their own section called the apocryphal section. This had never been done before. And of course, he was saying, oh, I'm not throwing them away. I'm not tossing them out. I'm just putting them in their own section. And then what happens 300 years later? They toss out the section. Yeah. In other words, they put it in the trash and then they emptied the trash. Or if you're a Windows user, they put it in the recycle bin and then emptied the recycle bin. You know, depends on what operating system you're using.
Exactly. So it just goes back to all of this. The problem is these are all much more complicated issues than the modern church wants to talk about.
It really is. Yeah, it's not as simple as people make it sound.
Yeah, and that's again translation. Again, that's a whole other video. It's not just one video; it's like a dozen different videos.
Yeah.
On how is translation done. And in fact, I'm going to go find the 10-minute Bible Hour. Actually, has a bunch of different videos on that he does. I think he explains it very, very well.
Yeah.
But the problem is, so again, it goes back to this is why I wanted to have you on so we could discuss the fact that this is why I do go back.
And feel free to ask me any other time because this is fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll definitely have you back for another hangout.
And by the way,
this is great stuff.
I wish there was a New King James Bible that included the apocryphal section, because when you read these books in the Old King James, I have such a hard time reading this Old King James English. I can barely read the U.S. Constitution, and that was 1776 or whatever, the Declaration of Independence. 1611. It's hard to read.
It is. It is. So the thing,
but we don't have a New King James version or an NIV version of the Apocrypha. Now we do have other things like the Common English Bible version of the Apocrypha.
Yeah.
But the Common English Bible is one of those newer loosey-goosey translations. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, it's great for referencing, but it's really weird sometimes. Yeah. I just wish there was a New King James version of the Apocrypha. It'd be really
I would
nice.
agree with that. Yeah, that would be nice.
But I mean, we do have something similar. Like there are Catholic Bibles, like the New American Bible, which kind of has New King James English. It's like it still sounds like the Bible, but it's not like this new loosey-goosey stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like you can read the Apocrypha and the King James.
Yes.
But it's so difficult to understand. What is this saying? Like the things that it says are so weird. Because it's a really old English, and some people, they can understand it because they've been studying it all their lives. But I started off on the NIV, so, and even the NIV's got some things that are weird with it. You look at the New King James, and it's just like, oh man, New King James got that better. But then again, the New King James got some weird stuff that I think the NIV gets better.
Well, so that goes back to the whole point. Every translation has its strengths, and every translations have its weaknesses.
Right.
And that's again, but the bigger thing that I think we're trying to talk about is the Septuagint. Like that, we need to give that more heed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And the ESV does that. And you know what's cool about the ESV? The ESV is known as the English Standard Version, and it's really popular right now. It's kind of like it's kind of like the new NIV. And so anyway,
I got mine right here.
Yeah. It's got some problems, and it's not perfect. But you know what's cool is they make an ESV that has the Apocrypha in it. That's pretty cool. Now, it doesn't follow the Greek Septuagint in the Old Testament, unfortunately. But hey, at least it's got those books, so you can at least see an ESV version of them and learn about this history. Daniel chapter 8 prophesies about the events in Maccabees. We didn't even get into that. Maybe the next time or something.
And here's the thing. Actually, that's almost an entire episode into itself. Because while I agree that it absolutely does, it is also a prophecy, I think, of the Antichrist.
It's both.
It's both. It's a prophecy.
Yeah.
So let's let's pray for Jean and her niece. Again, thank you for coming on. We're gonna have to have you back. Like that's gotta the Daniel thing. That's got to be its own episode. So much there. But yeah, we'll definitely have you back for another hangout. Again, it's a lot of fun. But thank you for coming on. Let's pray. Let's leave this little hangout with some prayer for Jean and her niece, and her niece's family. It's a tragic thing that's happening, and our again, she hasn't passed. We're going to pray for that, but our concerns are with you and her family right now. Please let them know that we are praying for this situation as well, and our heartfelt. Uh, I don't. I hate saying thoughts and prayers because it's been so. You know what? Forget that. I don't care how that's been demonized. Our thoughts and prayers are with y'all, right? Because that's all we can do right now. But that means something to Christians. Let the world. I don't need to. In fact, I'm going to say it's just to hack off the world, right? Let the world hates God, so they hate thoughts and prayers. We love God, so we love thoughts and prayers because we know it means something. So, Heavenly Father, we thank you, we praise you for all that you've done. Thank you for allowing us to come together here and just have this conversation and really explore your word and the history of it. And yeah, unfortunately, you have granted humanity free will, and and your hand has protected us from going too far afield. But sometimes we get things wrong, and you've given us the tools to fix that, to find it, to recognize it, and to work this out, to explore these things for ourselves. And we thank you that you've given us this, that it's not that we know that we can pursue you, and then pursuing the truth, we ultimately pursue you and your Son and your Spirit. Heavenly Father, we lift up Jean and her niece and her niece's family right now. Father, it's a hard thing that's happening, and we are praying now for her healing, that your hand would bring her to fullness, to health again, that she would see the furtherance of her grandchildren, that she would live a long and healthy life. We give these things over to you, Father, and we know that you are in control of all things. We know that you have a greater and wonderful plan. We see through this world through a haze, and we ask for her health for us and her family, because what is a loss for us, it hurts. But we know that you have a great plan, and if it is within your will that she would be healed, Father, we pray that that would be the thing. And we know that your will is absolute, and that what your heavenly plan is for the best. We pray that your hand is there, and that you would bring her to a fullness of healing. Father, we know that your Spirit will be on Jean and her family, and that you will be comforting them through this process. Whatever is resolved, we know that you will still be there. You were here before, you are here now, and you will be there with whatever you've decided. We pray these things in the name of your Son, Christ Jesus, through whom all things are possible. Amen. Well, guys, go give some love to Nathan. Go watch his videos. There's a lot that even the stuff we discussed that we haven't had a chance to talk about. I mean, there's just so much. So yeah, we're gonna definitely have to have you back on, and we can discuss Daniel 8, a bunch of things.
Yeah, we've been planning this for a while, haven't we?
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a long time. Well, I want to get you on
keep
Sunday.
Chatting on Facebook, like, yeah, we got to do this, and then like months go by.
Exactly. Well, I'm trying to make certain we do at least one Saturday hangout a month, because I try to keep my Saturdays free, because I got other shows to promote things and stuff. Yeah. So I try. Plus, I can only be online so often, right?
Yeah. Well, this is the Saturday that is the in between WandaVision and Falcon Winter Soldier. So
there you go. Exactly.
I mean, for me, it's like
you're like, yeah, I got nothing better to do now. It's like
nothing to do tonight,
Exactly. No, he's like, you asked me in a week, and you're like, I got stuff to do, man.
Yeah. I'm joking, by the way.
I got Winter Soldier over here.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm glad to have you on. We'll definitely have this back. I'm trying to do this at least once a month. Maybe if we get another one in, great. But I'd like to do it at least once a month, because there are conversations that just don't fit on the Thursday. Because the Thursdays we're going through the Bible. I really want that to be the focus there.
Oh, okay.
And same thing with Sundays are Sundays. And the problem with Sundays, there are a lot of people do have church, and the people I want to bring on are obviously Christians. So they usually have conflicting schedules.
Well, are a lot of these people that you know from your own church, or just people that you know from just around the net, or what?
So here's the thing. Most of the people who watch both live and elsewhere are from other paranormal channels, right?
Oh,
They're
okay. Paranormal.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, like the church that I'm with, I haven't been and physically attending there because this is my ministry, right? I'm sort of, I don't know if you'd call me a missionary or I hate the word pastor because I don't think I fit that at all. I certainly don't. But this is me. This is what I'm doing. So I do it Thursday nights and Sunday mornings. So this is it. Like this, and some people are using this as a foundation for not tonight, certainly not tonight, but Sundays and Thursdays for their own home churches and Bible studies and stuff like that. So
Okay.
we got Alan out in Kenya that he's doing, and he's
cool.
preaching out there.
Oh man, it's so crazy how I got these subscribers from all over the world. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Through eBay, I have shipped my Blu-ray and DVD to like New Zealand and Australia and Switzerland or whatever. It's crazy. In India, I think somebody in India ordered one. South Africa. Now I don't sell a DVD anymore because I think there's something wrong with my Blu-ray burner, and I don't want to give people a defective disc. But it's crazy, you get these subscribers from all over the world. It's pretty cool. Pretty
the internet has made the world. It's brought us all a little bit closer together, and for me, I think we're passing the age of the big. Not that there won't be other big preachers and evangelists and stuff like that, but I think the age of that is past, and it's going to be every man, woman, child on deck, right? It's all hands on deck, and so it's going to be small groups like this. It's home churches, it's small Bible studies. This is the kind of stuff that really is going to ultimately, I think, be the next move.
I'm not yawning because you're boring. I'm yawning because the green tea is wearing off.
It's because I'm boring, and that's legitimate.
It's not because you're boring. You go to there's a church that you go to, right, on Sunday?
Well, again, pre the whole COVID thing, that was the case.
Oh,
but so, like I said, right now, this is it. I serve the people.
You're in Texas, though. I mean, aren't they all opened up down there?
So yes, we are. But like I said, I did this last year. We are, but it's open, but not. So we were never as tightly closed down as, like, say, California or New York. But there were some. But and I didn't want to say it online, but I am actually looking at maybe doing more here because the church I was going to is 30 minutes away.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, I didn't mean to bring up anything.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's nothing bad. I mean, I was going to have the conversation with them later, but so the fact of the matter, it's 30 minutes away, and it's in South Dallas. I'm further south than that now.
Oh, speaking of Dallas, the
problem is I've lived. Mm-hmm. Oh, you froze up, Nathan. Oh no, did we lose Nathan? Or is it me? Did we lose me? And Nathan's perfectly fine? Oh, we can never tell on this side, can we? No, internet seems fine on my side. I think we lost Nathan, everybody. Well, at this point, I don't know who got lost. Nathan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah,
okay,
we got cut off for a second there.
Yeah. No, we got cut off. Unfortunately, the problem with the live feeds, you can never be certain who actually got cut out.
Oh gosh, it's so unreliable, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, they're working on improving the infrastructure. So yeah, long story short, where I've lived here for 7 years, and I'm like, all of my stuff is in South Dallas. I need to move my life back to here because this is the community I'm in. So I'm in that process right now. But right now, Sundays, this is where I'm at. Right, making everything good. So, but you're saying something about Dallas?
Yeah, I think that would be cool if. What the heck was that? Oh.
Gravity worked.
Gravity. Anyway,
it is the law.
I was just saying that I think it'd be cool to get your take on the JFK assassination. That'd be pretty cool because I've been looking into that.
Okay, so I did an episode on Texas from Porch. We had a friend of mine on who's been with the DPD and the Dallas Sheriff's Department for like a long time. So he actually knew a bunch of the guys who were involved in that.
You mean the guys that did the shooting?
No, not the guys who did the shooting.
Oh.
The guys. Yeah, no, the guys who were involved.
How many shooters were there? Like 12?
Yeah, 12. Like I love the everybody did it theory. but no, essentially, long story short, the episode's really, he has a really interesting perspective on the whole thing. Is he knew a lot of the police officers and who were offering, who were in Dallas that day and doing a lot of stuff, and he had some really interesting perspectives on that. So yeah, I would recommend that. I'd like to have him back on to talk more. I finally convinced him to write a book because he's. So let me say this: I had most of the conspiracy theories about Kennedy I have never bought because they just seem yes.
They seem stupid.
Well, they seem too over the top or too convoluted, and they sort of each one sort of misses a thing, right?
Well, they can't all be right because they're all contradictory.
Exactly, and so his points, or the points that he made in it, and he points out some things I had never even heard, and a lot of people sort of ignore, and it's like, man, he is the one guy who makes sense because he doesn't say that.
Really, I'd like to hear him.
Yeah, you should have, because his main point is he still says that yes, Oswald's a patsy, but he's not the patsy that we seem to think. We seem to think he's just some random dude. And it's like, no, he was with the CIA.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, he was actually a CIA agent. Well, not agent. He was.
How do you defect to the Soviet Union and then come back in without questioning? I mean, give me a break.
Exactly. So that's and what's worse is his wife, his first wife, was the daughter of a KGB general. Oh, geez. Right, and you're like, hold up.
How she just comes into the country.
Yeah, so the thing is, the belief was Oswald was actually okay, I'm gonna say this, so we gotta go. That Oswald was actually a double agent. That he was actually a CIA asset, but that when he was in Russia, Russia tried to turn him, but he was ultimately always working for the CIA. Well, the thing is, the CIA sets him up, and one of the big reasons for this is when and essentially, he just happened to be the right place at the right time, because when he is arrested by the police, by Dallas, right? They finally get him. They get him in. He makes his one phone call, right? The FBI is there, and they're rolling tape. So old school, right? You had a switchboard. There were two women running the switchboard. He's actually talked to these people, and she's and the story is she's there. The woman who's going to run the switchboard is there. They're waiting for the FBI is there. They give her the number to send, to make this connection, right? This number's in Virginia. I'm going to sum up a bunch of stuff here. When the agents who are supposed to be tapping that call find out what the number is, they shut it all down.
Really?
He still makes the call, and no one's there. But there's a name. He tracks it down, and essentially this guy is ex-CIA. And there's this very old, again, back in the day when technology was very primitive, you had ex-CIA members or people who had been in the I forget what it was before the CIA, the people who had retired, things like that, but still had their connections. They were used as sort of third parties if an agent or an asset got burned, right? So let's say you're a CIA asset or agent. They tell you, hey, if you get into trouble, this is the number you call. And so you would call them because they're not technically a CIA agent anymore. So so it doesn't raise too many red flags, but this is the number you call when you are like, this needs to be life or death. This needs to be, you are going to die if you don't call this number. That's the number he called. So it's like so the point is he was an asset for the CIA.
Yeah.
But he was put in a situation to be that fall guy. So it's really his stuff is really interesting. I'll see if I can find the episode and send it over to you. But
it's a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, no, I've got him. He's writing a book. I'm going to help him get it published. So it's going to be interesting. But Nathan, thank you for coming on. We're going to have you back so we can talk more about this. Yeah, guys, thank you for coming on. Again, this has been 2 hours and 30 minutes, of just... Is
it normally that long?
Dude, the Hangouts are as long as we want, as we want them. This is honestly the longest Hangout I've ever done.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what's cool about Saturday nights. You can do... I didn't know this was the longest one, huh? Okay. Wow.
Yeah. No, this is part... Well, I've only done a couple so far, so it is what it is.
Right. So this is kind of a new channel then, pretty much.
Yeah, well, Saturday nights, yeah, for whenever we do the
Dude, Joe
Hangouts.
Rogan, man, he goes for like hours and hours. I can't even
Dan
watch all
Aykroyd
that.
went like 4.5 hours.
4.5?
on-
Oh my goodness. I can't watch all that. Come on. Neil
Exactly.
deGrasse Tyson was fun to listen to, though. He was pretty cool.
No, he
knows
was. No,
so much
I
about
love
science.
Joe Rogan, Tim Pool. Those are the two best podcasts
Oh,
on. Yeah, because they can get political. Obviously, Tim Pool gets political a lot, but it's a broader spectrum. Like you get to learn things and find out.
Alex Jones was pretty funny too, but man, Alex Jones cusses too much. He's cussing like crazy. And come on, man.
Well, Joe Rogan's got got a mouth on him too.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're gonna have you back because this is fun. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do this more. Thank you for coming on, guys. We appreciate y'all, and I will see y'all tomorrow. We're gonna talk about Melchizedek because that is.
Now, do you want me to come back tomorrow, or you're just doing it?
Well, I was gonna. If you're willing to be here tomorrow morning for Melchizedek, I'm willing to have you on.
I don't know if I can wake up in time. I'm going to church tomorrow morning.
There you go.
I don't know. Maybe.
We'll figure that out tomorrow. How's that? Right. Guys, but no matter what, we'll talk about Melchizedek tomorrow. We'll